the Underworld King's daughter. 1. If Ling Chen were present, he would only have a single word to say to this emperor: scram. Ling Chen did as he pleased, and any consequences were of secondary importance. Even if he destroyed his relationship with all of the humans of the Forgotten Continent, he would find a solution. However, Yun Meng Xian was different from Ling Chen. As a woman with meticulous thinking and the lady of the Ling Tian city, there were far too many things she had to consider. Moreover, her decisions and words not only represented herself but also the entirety of Ling Tian city. Yun Meng Xian looked away, unwilling to directly look at the mad emperor as she calmly replied, "Since the Forgotten Emperor has already decided this for us and brought an army, why does it matter if Ling Tian city admits it or not? Forgotten Emperor, you directly said how you wish to sanction Ling Tian city. Very well." The Forgotten Emperor nodded, feeling quite pleased with Yun Meng Xian's response. "Looks like Lady Yun has woken up. This is great. Ling Tian city's crimes cannot be forgiven and have enraged all of the humans of the Forgotten Continent, and Ling Tian city should have been destroyed. However, Ling Tian city is, after all, a player's city, so it's understandable that you don't understand many of our Forgotten Continent's laws. Moreover, considering Ling Tian city's scale as well as the number of the Forgotten Continent's residents and players that have moved into it, many people will lose their homes if we destroy it. As such, although Ling Tian city's crimes are unforgivable, we do not wish to destroy it unless it is absolutely necessary. If Ling Tian city submits to the Forgotten City, not only can Ling Tian city be saved, but your position as lady of the city, as well as the management elders, can also be kept. What the Forgotten City wants is to be able to monitor and manage Ling Tian city. We will manage Ling Tian city when you are in violation of any of the Forgotten Continent's laws or bring negative effects to the Forgotten Continent, preventing your sins from becoming greater. As for Ling Tian city's current development, we will not hinder it. After all, Ling Tian city is a player city, and we shouldn't involve ourselves too much with it." After the Forgotten Emperor finally finished speaking, everyone from Ling Tian city felt as if their lungs were going to burst from anger. Monitor and control? Shouldn't involve yourselves too much with it. Pshaw! When all was said and done, the Forgotten City would effectively have complete control over Ling Tian city. The so-called "shouldn't involve ourselves too much with it" was merely a fart that not even an idiot would believe. Although the 3 unforgivable crimes had already shown everyone just how shameless the Forgotten Emperor was, everyone wanted to throw hot dung at his face after they heard what he had said. If the Forgotten Emperor's face were shaved off and laid on the ground, it would be enough to circle the Forgotten Continent twice and tie a knot as well. Facing the Forgotten Emperor's shameless and despicable words, Yun Meng Xian remained calm as she replied, "If the Forgotten City wishes to destroy Ling Tian city, it'll be difficult for us to save it. If everything is as the Forgotten Emperor said, we can at least allow Ling Tian city to continue to exist, so your conditions are not unacceptable. However, Ling Tian city is not only owned by me, so I need some time to talk with others before giving the Forgotten Emperor a reply. Lady Yun is indeed wise and intelligent. No wonder why you are hailed as the lady of the city at such a young age." The Forgotten Emperor nodded in satisfaction. "Since it's like this, I will give Lady Yun some time. However, I will only give you 1 day. Tomorrow, I will come back to this place to hear Lady Yun's answer at this time. Whether or not Ling Tian city exists after tomorrow will depend on Lady Yun's answer. I trust that with your intellect you won't let me down." After speaking, the Forgotten Emperor raised a finger, as the massive army instantly started to retreat. Before the Forgotten Emperor left, he said seriously to Yun Meng Xian, "Remember, this is the Forgotten Continent, and you players are only outsiders." After the Forgotten City's army left, everyone came and surrounded Yun Meng Xian, a heavy expression on their faces. They all knew that Yunmeng Xian definitely wouldn't agree to the Forgotten Emperor's conditions. She had merely bought them some time. "Big Sister Meng Xian, what should we do?" Xiaoqi asked worriedly. "AI," Yunmeng Xian lightly sighed. "Looks like this battle is unavoidable. Indeed, things are not looking good for Ling Tian City." Li Xiaoshui helplessly smiled. Although a single day's worth of time is quite short, it should be enough to move people and make preparations. Yunmeng Xian turned around and seriously said, "Big Brother, Alliance Master Xiao, immediately notify all of the guilds that all players are to gather elsewhere and wait for orders. Xiao Shui, close the class change hall within 10 hours and tell the 10 elders to make preparations for certain matters. Seal the business street, turn off all business and entertainment facilities, and take the residents to the safe region. Chief Dillo, immediately gather the entire clan and move them to the Nameless Ridge within 15 hours. Also, remember to take the things that cannot be abandoned." "No, we definitely won't go. We built Ling Tian City with our hands and sweat, and it gave us hope and a future. How can we desert it in this crisis?" Chief Dillo furiously shook his head as he clenched his fists. Yunmeng Xian shook her head and said in a soft voice, "Chief Dillo, I can fully understand the dwarf's passion and emotions, but this isn't escaping from fear. The dwarf clan has no battle strength, so you won't be able to help and may cause many dwarves to die. You're different from us players in that you only have a single life. If you're alive, we still have hope to rebuild our home with your talent and wisdom even if Ling Tian City is destroyed. If you all die in the battle, there will not be any hope for rebuilding, and you will only endanger your clan, making you the greatest sinner of the dwarf clan." Chief Dillo lowered his head as he said in pain, "I know, but Ling Tian City definitely won't be destroyed. The gods will punish those evil humans." Yunmeng Xian turned to look at Greenwood, not knowing how to start. Greenwood nodded at her, saying, "Lady of the city, rest assured, the fairy clan's average strength is higher than that of the humans by at least 2 grades, and apart from the elderly and the young, we have 1,000 fairies who won't let them do as they wish. And me." A voice as low and heavy as a mountain came from beneath their feet, shocking everyone. Chief Dillo suddenly raised his head as he excitedly cried out, "Lord Guardian God, they have shown me the greed and wickedness of humans, making me feel disgusted. As the guardian of Ling Tian City, I will do all I can to fulfill my duty. They will not easily pass the land I protect. Thank you, Mountain Giant," Yunmeng Xian earnestly said as she looked at the ground. What had happened in front of the city gates quickly spread throughout the entirety of China, and then the entire world, creating massive waves. The system's royal city had been suppressed by a player's city, forcing them to threaten to destroy the player's city. This had never happened before in the history of virtual games. The atmosphere in Ling Tian City greatly changed, and as the second day drew closer, the ever-bustling Ling Tian City became quieter and quieter. Underworld, Blood Lake. "You're the Underworld King?" Ling Chen gritted his teeth, using all of his strength to try to escape from the invisible bindings around him. However, this was futile, and he was unable to move even a finger. Apart from this Underworld King, who else could tear open a passage to this space? The Underworld King's voice boomed like thunder, causing the Underworld Blood Lake to tremble continuously. The Underworld King was evidently enraged. The power that could suppress even the undead war god made it so that the blood within Ling Chen almost stopped flowing. Over the past thousands of years, you're the first person to reach the Underworld Blood Lake without this Underworld King's permission. The fire purgatory has collapsed, and Qi Xian Wuhen's aura is gone. It looks like you defeated him. For you to be able to defeat the undead war god and have the power to reach here, this Underworld King never thought that you were not one of the undead of my underworld, but a living creature. It was normal for the powerful Underworld King to be able to recognize that Ling Chen was not an undead. His gaze turned towards the Underworld blood lake behind Ling Chen as he furiously said, "Although I don't know how a living creature like you was not affected by the deadly miasma and reached here safely, you must die for daring to intrude into the Underworld forbidden area no matter who you are. And after you're dead, you'll be melted in the Underworld blood lake." The Underworld King stretched out his hand towards Ling Chen as a ball of black energy gathered in his hand and then covered Ling Chen. Under the terrifying bindings, Ling Chen was unable to move at all, and he could only feel the sense of death coming closer and closer. Was this the power of the Saint Destroyer grade? It was so oppressive that it made him despair. Die. You're the first person to die under this Underworld King's hand, and be buried in the Underworld blood lake in thousands of years. Whether or not you can become an undead of my Underworld will depend on your luck. The darkness in the Underworld King's hand began to take shape, and in the next second, it would send Ling Chen into the abyss of death. At this moment, a petite figure broke through the water of the Underworld blood lake and rose up into the air as a system announcement sounded in Ling Chen's ears. Ding! Your pet Lang'er's Underworld King power has awoken, and all of her stats have been greatly increased. Her Underworld King power and Underworld King soul has awoken, and she has unlocked the Underworld King's secret skill, Underworld Blood Moon Samsara. Lung, air. Ling Chen subconsciously called out as a confused thought entered his mind. Lang'er? Underworld King power? What did that mean? What was going on? The Underworld King's shock was much greater than his, and he roared out, "Who is it? Who is it that can enter the Underworld lake? Wait, how can you have the same aura of the Underworld royal clan as me?" The blood-red water quickly fell from the petite figure, revealing Lang'er's face and body. Lang'er looked just as she had been before, and only her dark eyes looked deeper. When the Underworld King saw Lang'er's appearance and the aura from Lang'er's body, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and he froze on the spot. His face started to twist as his entire body trembled, and the darkness energy that he had been gathering immediately disappeared. He stared at Lang'er with a pair of incredibly wide eyes. Time seemed to stop, and after a long while, he finally spoke with a trembling voice. "Chan'er, is it you, my Chan'er? Is it really you?" After saying these few words, the Underworld King choked up with emotion. This peak-level existence in the mystic moon world, who controlled the entire Underworld, and was someone that even the 3 moon goddesses dared not to offend, was trembling like a willow in the wind. Tears streamed down his savage-looking face, and his gaze fell on Lang'er's face, not looking away or even daring to blink, feeling that this was a dream. The Underworld King's daughter, too, the Underworld King started to move towards Lang'er, staggering along. Facing the Underworld King, who seemed to have lost himself, Lang'er remained just as calm as normal. As the Underworld King came closer, she gave Ling Chen a questioning gaze, as if she had been scared by the Underworld King's face. She lightly floated over to Ling Chen and hid behind him. The Underworld King stopped walking and gazed at the emotionless Lang'er as he cried out, "Chan'er, it's me. Don't you recognize me? I'm your father. I've been desperately looking for you all these years, and every day I've dreamed of bringing you back. The heavens have truly pitied me and brought you back. You're finally back. I'm your father, the Underworld King. Can you not recognize me anymore?" Ling Chen's eyes widened. Father. The Underworld King was Lang'er's father, and Lang'er was the Underworld King's daughter. The chaotic emotions within Ling Chen mixed into 4 words. What the bloody hell? Father. Lang'er looked up at Ling Chen and asked in a small voice, "Master, what is a father?" Ling Chen was speechless. He didn't know how to answer her question. "And Master? You're calling him Master?" The teary-eyed Underworld King reacted as if he had been smashed in the head by a brick, and he became incredibly furious as he stared at Ling Chen with a burning gaze. You damned human! Do you know who she is? She's my daughter, the Underworld King's daughter. She's the next Underworld Queen who will inherit my position, and yet, a measly human like you told her to call you master. Preposterous? Unforgivable! You, if it weren't for the fact that Chanair was here, this Underworld King would have destroyed you into 10,000 pieces. Destroy me into 10,000 pieces? I'm afraid you won't be able to. Ling Chen had calmed down and gathered his thoughts by now, and he spoke neither fast nor slow. What did you say? The Underworld King was furious, and killing intent filled the space around them, as he gathered darkness energy and prepared to smash it towards Ling Chen. However, Ling Chen calmly looked at him before slowly saying, Underworld King, could it be that you haven't noticed that there is a soul sacrifice contract between us that she forced onto me? Moreover, it's her second soul sacrifice contract. If it were the first time, she would be fine even if I died. However, this is her second and last soul sacrifice contract. With this contract, my life determines her life, and my death determines her death. We essentially share a life. If I don't die, she won't die, but if you kill me, she'll also die. Are you sure you still want to kill me? You? The Underworld King furiously roared, unable to lower his raised hand. Moreover, you seem to not have realized that only half her soul, no, not even half of her soul, is remaining. Not only that, she doesn't have a real body. Ling Chen continued to speak. Qi Yu had told him all about the soul sacrifice contract and Langaire's state when he had first met her. Although I don't know why she's like this, it's evident that she must have received massive damage in the past, causing her body to be destroyed and her soul to be mostly destroyed. She's only able to continue existing because she has a special undead body and the soul sacrifice contract. If it weren't for the soul sacrifice contract allowing her to bind herself to someone's life, she would have vanished from this world long ago. However, because her soul is damaged, she's unable to remember all of her memories, and she only has her subconscious left. When I met her, she had forgotten all of her past, and she only knew that she loved dolls. The Underworld King's hand fell powerlessly, and all of the fury in his eyes was replaced with sorrow and self-blame. He looked at Langaire carefully, and he found that everything Ling Chen had said was true. He held his head as he painfully screamed, It's all my fault for being so useless. Even as the Underworld King, I was unable to protect my daughter. If it weren't for my Underworld royal clan's Underworld King never dies and soul sacrifice, I would have lost Chanair and caused the Underworld royal clan's lineage to end. Although it's been so many years, the heavens have finally brought my Chanair back. Emotions of joy and grief mixed chaotically within the Underworld King's heart. He wanted to come closer to Langaire, but he was also afraid of scaring her. He stretched out his large and coarse hand, wiping away his tears as he warmly smiled at Langaire and spoke in a gentle voice. Chanair, I know you've lost your memories and don't remember your father, but don't worry. Now that the heavens have brought you home, I'll do my best to help you remember the things from the past. Just close your eyes and let me see what you've gone through in the outside world, all right? With the Underworld King's status and temperament, it was the first time in 10,000 years that he had spoken in such a tone. When Langaire heard his voice, she continued to stare at Ling Chen. So Ling Chen said to her in a small voice, Langaire, close your eyes and don't think about anything. Langaire was very willing to listen to Ling Chen, and she closed her eyes. At that moment, the Underworld King also closed his eyes and stretched out his palm towards where Langaire was. A very dim, gray light was released from his hand until it touched Langaire's body, connecting the Underworld King and Langaire. Ling Chen knew what the Underworld King was doing, and he did not make any noise. The space fell into silence, and initially he could see some anger on the Underworld King's face, but it was then replaced with pain, which gradually disappeared until his expression calmed down. Less than a minute later, the Underworld King opened his eyes. At that moment, Ling Chen felt the bindings around him disappear, and he regained his freedom. The aura and killing intent weighing down on him also disappeared. Ling Chen hurriedly stretched his body, then looked at the Underworld King. He found that the way the Underworld King looked at him had greatly changed. All of the rage and killing intent was gone, replaced by warmness and a hint of gratitude. "Young human, please forgive my rudeness from before." The Underworld King's words shocked Ling Chen. The powerful Underworld King had actually apologized to him. Just 2 minutes ago, he had been roaring about destroying him into 10,000 pieces. "Members of our Underworld royal clan can read each other's memories, and I've seen everything that she went through." The Underworld King's voice became calm. "During these past years, I've never given up on looking for Chanair because I felt that she was still in this world. I've searched the place that she was in, the Forest of Bones, before. However, I never thought that not only was her body destroyed, but her soul was also damaged. I would never have imagined that she would use a soul sacrifice contract with the Warring Palace skeleton to survive. As such, her Underworld King aura completely disappeared, so it was impossible for me to find her by her aura." After a long sigh, he walked forwards and patted Ling Chen's arm. "Thank you, young human. I can see from her memories that you saved her. Although the soul sacrifice contract was forced on you, you treated her very well after you brought her away. You treated her so well that I feel ashamed as a father. Moreover, you brought her here, allowing me to finally see my daughter again. I, the Underworld King, never like to owe anyone, but I owe you so much that I don't know how to repay you." From Langair's memories, he could see countless years of darkness, fear, and loneliness. After Ling Chen came, there were many pleasant memories. He gave her the doll she loved so much every day, and many other toys, and told her all sorts of stories. He taught her about things that she didn't know about, and he did his best to make her happy. The Underworld King could tell that Ling Chen was incredibly good to her, and had no ulterior motive. If someone was good to the Underworld King, he wouldn't feel anything. After all, there were countless beings that wanted to curry favor with him to the point that he felt annoyed. However, this was different for anyone who treated his daughter truly well. He felt like he had failed Langair, and it was Ling Chen who had taken her out of the lonely forest of bones, given her a new life, and made her happy every day. And now, he had brought her back to his side. This was the first time the Underworld King had ever felt so grateful to someone, despite the fact that he was a human. Ling Chen smiled. "No need to thank me. Since she follows me and calls me master, I have to take responsibility for her. Everything I did was something I should have done, so there's nothing to thank me for. Moreover, Langair's is very cute and good, so anyone would want to be good to her. Coming here was merely a coincidence. It's just that. Are you completely sure Langair's your daughter?" "She's definitely my daughter. Let alone 10,000 years, I would still recognize her even if 100,000 or even 1,000,000 years had passed," the Underworld King said sorrowfully. "The fact that she was able to enter the Underworld Blood Lake is solid proof. The Underworld Blood Lake will devour all living and dead creatures in the world, even the moon gods of the Moon God clan. However, only the Underworld Royal Clan does not fear it, and we can instead absorb energy from the lake. The Underworld Royal Clan has always only had a sole successor, so she is the only Underworld Queen of her generation. How could I mistake her aura? And also, weren't you curious as to why you weren't affected by the miasma when you entered the Underworld? It's because the Underworld Royal Clan possesses great resistance of miasma, so the miasma won't harm you no matter how dense the miasma is with her by your side. That's why you were able to arrive here safely." Being forced into a marriage, Ling Chen slowly nodded. "So it was like that. Wait! You just said that you and Ling your daughter, have been separated for 10,000 years?" "That's right." The Underworld King heavily nodded. 10,000 years. A whole 10,000 years. 10,000 years have passed in the blink of an eye, and if Ling body hadn't been destroyed and her soul hadn't been damaged, she would have already matured and may have become the next Underworld Queen. However, it's already good enough that she's back. 10,000 years. It had actually been such a long time. To humans, 10,000 years was something that they could not even comprehend. Ling Chen thought for a moment before hesitantly asking, "Then is it possible for you to tell me how you and Ling were separated? After being with Ling for so long, I want to know about her past." "The Shura's devastation," the Underworld King answered. Because of the things he had seen from Ling memories, he was incredibly thankful to Ling Chen, and he also deeply trusted him. "I'm sure that with your experiences you already know what the Shura's devastation was. Countless beings died, bringing disaster to the entire forgotten continent. In the end, even the underworld was caught in it. Chanair and I were mercilessly attacked by the Shura without any preparation. The Shura was simply too powerful, and even despite fighting with my full strength, I was unable to stop him. I was heavily wounded, and I'd lost my ability to fight for a long time. Luckily, my underworld generals Warring Palace and Warring Star were able to escape with Chanair. Afterwards, I could not find them, but because of the connection between our bloodlines, I knew that Chanair was still in this world. After the Shura's devastation, the Demon Beast clan tried to bring more disaster. The underworld had been greatly weakened, so we could only close all of the underworld doors, and I, who had temporarily lost the ability to fight, could only hide like a turtle in the underworld blood lake to recover my strength, and I was unable to look for Chanair. Finally, after the Demon Beast clan had finally been vanquished, I had recovered some of my strength, and I started to desperately search for Chanair. Afterwards, we found Warring Star's remains at the Demon Beast clan's battlefield, but I could not find Warring Palace and Chanair. From then onwards, I searched for 10,000 years, but I was unable to find Chanair. 10,000 years. The Underworld King raised his head. After feeling immense joy from finding his daughter, he was filled with immeasurable sorrow and aggrievement. Ling Chen didn't know about Warring Star, but he clearly remembered Warring Palace. Evidently, they had been attacked by the Demon Beast clan 10,000 years ago. Warring Star had died to stop the Demon Beast clan while Warring Palace took Ling and escaped. As they escaped, its life force was about to run out and was about to turn into a skeleton, but its undying will allowed him to continue to remain by Ling side as a skeleton. Even after 10,000 years, he still had the willpower to protect her, until Ling used the heavenly wrath of the 9 suns to kill it, and was once again killed by Ling Chen afterwards. Ling Chen couldn't help but respect the underworld general called Warring Palace. Regardless, the father and daughter have been reunited. Although Ling is currently unable to remember her past, as long as she has enough time after she's returned to the underworld. Oh, right, Underworld King. Did you say there were methods to help her restore her memory? Is that true? Ling Chen looked over at Ling behind him, who had no idea what they were talking about. His expression was calm, but the shock within him was unable to be calmed down. Ling who he had coincidentally picked up and spent every day making happy, was actually the Underworld King's daughter, and she was next in line to become the Underworld Queen. How could he feel calm in the face of such a terrifying truth? Even more importantly, because of the soul sacrifice contract, Ling was his humanoid pet. An Underworld Queen was his pet, bound by an inviolable contract, sharing a life with him. Oh my God! This journey to the Underworld had simply been too eventful. Just what else could happen? There are indeed many methods. The Underworld King nodded, but then he frowned and looked at Langhair before turning his gaze to the Underworld Blood Lake. Chanair has lost her memories because her soul is incomplete. As long as we can awaken the damaged portion of her soul, she will naturally recover her memories, feelings, intelligence, and speaking abilities. Although the Underworld Blood Lake can heal part of our power, it's unable to heal our souls. Although there are many ways to repair one's soul, not only are they incredibly tough, they also need an incredibly long time. How long? Ling Chen asked as he frowned. The shortest takes 30 years, while the longest takes 70 or so years. The Underworld King calmly replied. Ling Chen was speechless. Perhaps this amount of time didn't mean much to the Underworld King, but that was an incredibly long time to humans. Not only that, the soul will be greatly stimulated throughout the repairing process, causing pain to the soul. Moreover, there's a chance of failure. The Underworld King continued. However, Ling Chen strangely felt that the Underworld King seemed incredibly calm as he spoke, as if he had some other method. He definitely wouldn't be willing to use those methods on Langhair. Could it be that there are better methods? Ling Chen asked. There are. Of course there are. The Underworld King turned and looked at him with a burning gaze, making Ling Chen feel quite uncomfortable. The Underworld King smiled. Before looking at Chanair's memories, I definitely wouldn't have used such a method. However, there's no problem. The Underworld King's smile became deeper and stranger. Not only will the effects be evident within a short period of time, but there also aren't any side effects or pain. Moreover, not only will it restore Chanair's soul, but it will also slowly repair her body, turning her from a half-soul, half-corporeal existence into a true fleshly being. What's more, the only person who can help her with this is you, who Chanair has the soul sacrifice contract with. The Underworld King said, as he gave Ling Chen a deep look and patted him on the shoulder. Me? Ling Chen asked in surprise. That's right. This is because Chanair made a soul sacrifice contract with you, and it's the last one she can use in her lifetime. With the soul sacrifice contract, her body and soul are both attached to you. You should know that no one else can touch Langhair but you because of the soul sacrifice contract. As such, you can use your soul and life force to awaken the dormant part of Chanair's soul and help her slowly regain her body. Only you can do it. Although he had heard every word the Underworld King had said, Ling Chen felt incredibly confused, and he asked, "What should I do then?" Very simple. The Underworld King tapped his chin before saying in a low voice, "Consummate with her." Consummate? Ling Chen frowned in confusion, and after falling silent for a while, his eyes widened as he asked, "By consummate, you couldn't mean?" The Underworld King grinned. "Nonsense. What else could it mean? Most of Chanair's memories are filled with you, and although she doesn't know it, she's heavily dependent on you. Although you're a human, I can tell that you're quite extraordinary from Chanair's memories. For you to be able to defeat even the undead war god, even I feel some respect towards you, so I suppose you're good enough for Chanair. Most importantly, you're very good to Chanair, and adding on the fact that your consummation can help her regain her soul and body, I think this is perfect." But Ling Chen started to stammer. "What do you mean, but?" The Underworld King glared at him. Could it be that the Underworld King's daughter, the next Underworld Queen, is not good enough for you? That's not the problem. Just as Ling Chen was wondering if his journey could be any more eventful, it had suddenly become plenty more eventful. The Underworld King's words shocked Ling Chen out of his wits, making him feel at a loss as to what to say. "Don't you think? Langhair is still too young. She is still a child, so how could she, young? How is she too young? My daughter is 10,823 years old this year. Even your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather would think she's too old. How could she be too young? The Underworld King roared. Ling Chen choked on his words. Although Lang'er looked like a young girl, she was actually more than 10,000 years old, so he was unable to use this excuse anymore. He scratched his head as he hurriedly said, Underworld King, you should know that I'm a human, while Lang'er belongs to your Underworld royal clan and is, therefore, an undead. For a living being and an undead to heir, undead? Who told you that the Underworld royal clan are all undead? The Underworld King retorted before pointing at Lang'er. Lang'er is my daughter. Have you heard about undead having children before? Ling Chen was speechless. Indeed, he had never heard of such a thing before. However, wasn't the Underworld King the emperor of countless undead in the Underworld? As the emperor of undead, how could he not be an undead? Moreover, from Lang'er's attacks, he could tell that they were evidently darkness attributed. The Underworld King calmly replied, The Underworld royal clan are not undead, nor are we living beings. Our ancestor was the ancient. Forget it, this is my Underworld royal clan's secret, and there's no need for you to know. You can think of it as the Underworld royal clan having an affinity with the aura of death and the power of death, but with a living body and an undead soul. Furthermore, I can promise you on the honor of the Underworld royal clan that there will be no problems with an Underworld queen consummating with a living creature. Even having children will be no problem. Ling Chen. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The Underworld King suddenly became infuriated. You keep looking for reasons to refuse this. Could it be that you look down on the Underworld royal clan and think that my daughter isn't good enough for you? No. Of course not. Ling Chen immediately waved my hands. Could it be that you don't want to save my daughter? The Underworld King became even more furious. Of course not. Ling Chen almost felt like crying. What was this progression of events? Then what are you hesitating for? The Underworld King grabbed Ling Chen and roared at him, almost causing his eardrums to burst. I've been separated from Chan Air for 10,000 years, and I've been dreaming for her to call me father. And now, she's right in front of me, but she doesn't recognize me. A young man like you who hasn't been a father before wouldn't understand this sort of pain. I don't want to wait for even a second. I'm going to immediately announce to the entire city that I've found my Chan Air, and that I've also found a son-in-law. Tonight, you're going to get married and help Chan Air recover her memories, so that she can at least call me father. If her memories haven't come back by tomorrow, then don't even hope of leaving. Ling Chen. Email protected, #$%. The Princess Grand wedding. The ordinarily quiet and heavy atmosphere in the Underworld royal city became raucous and bustling because a shocking piece of news had spread throughout the city in half a day. The Underworld King's daughter, who had been lost for 10,000 years, was back. Just this alone would have caused the entire city to celebrate for 3 days and 3 nights. But that wasn't all. Not only had the Underworld King found his daughter, but he had also found a son-in-law, and the wedding was going to be today at the Underworld King's residence. Even the stupidest and slowest undead would feel that this was a bit too sudden. They had been separated for 10,000 years, and now, after finding her, he was immediately arranging a marriage. Many undead wondered whether it was that they had become unfamiliar with the times, or if the Underworld King was a bit too hasty. No matter what, the marriage of the Underworld King's daughter was set in stone. Right after noon, the entirety of the Underworld royal city was filled with glowing lights, and there were people hurrying around the Underworld King's residence, hurriedly making preparations, creating a bustling scene. Moreover, the Underworld King had personally given the order that all preparations were to be ready by 7 p.m. even if all the high-grade undead were to be used as laborers as well, or the consequences would be dire. This was no laughing matter. However, as the other main character of this event, the Underworld King did not care about Ling Chen's opinion at all, and he had completely ignored it. Underworld King, this is an incredibly important event for your daughter. How can you rush through it like this? Ling Chen yelled at the Underworld King. It's because she's my daughter that I'm in such a hurry. Otherwise, why else would I go through all this hassle? The Underworld King roared back. Fudge! When has there ever been a father who throws his daughter at another man? Even if you don't feel bad about this, I feel bad about it. Who cares if you feel bad? You have the soul sacrifice contract, and Chanair won't ever be able to leave you. Apart from you, who else can she marry? It's going to happen sooner or later, so I might as well make it happen sooner. That way, Chanair's soul and body can be restored earlier. I don't want to wait even an extra second. Can you understand the feeling of having your daughter in front of you, but not able to recognize you? Can you? But the hell are you still saying but for? There's no way to get rid of the soul sacrifice contract. Could it be that you want my Underworld King's daughter to follow you for life without even officially having a title? If you continue to try to push this off, do you think I wouldn't dare to tell the Moon God clan that you have the Lunar Scourge? How did you know? Of course, it's from seeing Chanair's memories. Even if she doesn't recognize the Lunar Scourge, do you think I wouldn't recognize it? I've already announced my daughter's marriage to the Underworld, and everyone knows about it. All of the mayors and Underworld lords are hurrying here, and the Underworld Royal City has long since started preparing. Even the bridal room has been prepared. If you don't marry my daughter, what will happen to my face as the Underworld King? How will I continue to stay in the Underworld? Even if the sky falls, you and my daughter will still be getting married tonight. Ling Chen could only give up. If he continued yelling at the Underworld King, it would all be futile. Ling Chen found that he couldn't talk any sense into the Underworld King in front of him, and he had seen all of the preparations in the Underworld Royal City. Even if he still felt conflicted, all he could do was cry to himself. He hadn't agreed to this whole thing, nor could he agree. However, the Underworld King didn't even need him to agree, and he had announced the matter to the entire Underworld, and everyone had started making preparations. Now, even if Ling Chen wasn't willing, there was nothing he could do. If he continued to refuse, he would cause the Underworld King to lose face in front of the entire Underworld, and it would make the situation much, much worse. Forgetting that this was within the virtual game and in the Underworld, the other party was Ling Chen. How could he do this? On the other hand, Ling Chen silently sat next to Ling Chen obediently, hazily, and curiously looking around the Underworld Royal City and the Underworld King residence. She couldn't understand the words being said between Ling Chen and the Underworld King at all, and she didn't know that she had just been given away by her father, who she had been separated from for 10,000 years. Sitting in one of the rooms in the Underworld King's residence, Ling Chen could only plead, "Underworld King, can I leave for a bit?" He was unable to contact the outside world in the Underworld, and the outside world was unable to contact him. He hadn't logged off for a whole day, and he should probably log off to at least meet with the others for a while. However, before he could finish his sentence, the Underworld King furiously roared back, "No way! You're not allowed to go anywhere. If you go, my Chanair will leave with you. If you don't make it back from the wedding, what will we do? Absolutely not. Before Chanair's able to remember me as her father, I won't allow you to take even half a step outside the Underworld King's residence." As such, Ling Chen could only obediently stay inside. Fight? How could he fight the Saint Destroyer grade Underworld King? Run? Where could he run? And even if he got away, the Underworld King would be completely infuriated, and running would cause him to lose great face. The consequences would be unimaginable. The old fellow was evidently using this to give him pressure. Although the Underworld King was in a rush to help Ling Chen recover her memories, this old fellow's actions, were evidently pushing him to screw his daughter. It simply didn't feel right. Very soon, it was 7 p.m., and as Ling Chen was still desperately thinking of ideas, the time for the wedding arrived. The process in the underworld was completely different to what Ling Chen was used to. Once it was time, he was pushed by a smiling undead granny into a large hall, and Ling Chen was also naturally by his side. As soon as he entered the hall, an extremely dense deathly aura flooded towards him. The Underworld King's face was red and ruddy, and he sat in the highest position. There was also countless other high-grade, powerful undead gathered. When Ling Chen and Ling Chen appeared, the hall burst into noise, filling with cheers, praising, and flattering. Congratulations, Lord Underworld King, for finding the princess and a suitable suitor. These two simultaneous happy events are a blessing to the underworld. The heavens bless the underworld by bringing our lost princess back. What a wonderful occasion! I wish the princess every happiness. Lord Underworld King is wise and mighty, and the underworld will forever be at peace. I wish the princess and Lord Son-in-Law to be eternally in love. Lord Son-in-Law, heir, although your deathly aura is quite weak, you still look like an extraordinary fellow. Congratulations, Lord Underworld King, for finding a son-in-law. Hearing these words, the Underworld King waved his hand as he laughed, saying, My son-in-law doesn't have much deathly aura, because he's not an undead, but a regular human. Although he looks quite young, he's quite extraordinary. The matter with the fire purgatory collapsing was because of him, and even Qi Xian Wuhen died at his hands. Otherwise, how could this Underworld King allow him to marry my daughter? Ha ha ha. The thing that had caused the Underworld King to be incredibly furious was now something he boasted greatly about. A useless son-in-law and a son-in-law who could defeat the undead war god were completely different. Once the Underworld King said that, the way that the undead looked at Ling Chen completely changed. The undead war god Qi Xian Wuhen was more powerful than even the 8 underworld gods, and he was second only to the Underworld King in the entire underworld. It wasn't too surprising that the Underworld King's son-in-law was a human. After all, the Underworld King's wife had been a human too. However, this human looked so young and weak, yet he had defeated the undead war god. Many of the powerful undead who knew how powerful the undead war god was felt quite doubtful, but since the Underworld King had said so, that was that. Instantly, a new wave of praises burst forth, as expected from Lord Underworld King's son-in-law. Not only is he handsome and heroic-looking, but he's also so accomplished at such a young age. He's simply shocking and incomparable. Only such a person is good enough for our princess. Congratulations, Lord Underworld King, for obtaining such an excellent son-in-law. The days ahead for the underworld look bright. Ling Chen stood there like a puppet while listening to the cacophony of voices. Looking at the hall full of high-grade undead, Ling Chen found that they were just like living humans. Although they were undead and were incredibly powerful, they would still flatter and try to curry favor with their overlord. However, this wasn't too surprising. After all, high-grade undead had an intellect that was not inferior to normal humans. In that case, the way they did things was most likely quite similar to the human world's way of doing things. It was just that the process for this wedding made Ling Chen almost cough up blood. This was how the princess's grand wedding went. The first step was for the Underworld King to use his thunderous voice to announce that his daughter, Ming Xiaochan, and the Forgotten Continent's Ling Chen were now married. The second step was to loudly declare for them to be taken to the bridal room. Following this, the marriage ceremony came to a conclusion. All that remained was for the undead to wildly celebrate, none of which concerned Ling Chen and Ling Chen. When Ling Chen was pushed into the bridal room by the undead granny, he desperately wanted to rush over to the Underworld King and roar into his face. How the hell is this a wedding for the princess of the underworld? Could you make it even simpler? It ended before it even goddamn began. In actuality, this was already quite complex for an underworld marriage. This was because everyone within the underworld was an undead, and although there were both males and females, they didn't have the passions and desires that living beings had. Very few high-grade undead had those sorts of desires, so marriages were quite rare. In the entire underworld royal city, many years would pass by without even a single pair of undead getting married. As such, the wedding ceremonies had become underworldized. The first step was to declare the wedding to the public with enough undead bearing witness, and the second step, there was none. There seemed to be some sort of noise-ceiling barrier in the room, because even though the undead outside were incredibly loud, they couldn't hear their voices any more once they entered the bridal room. The instant they entered the bridal room, Ling Chen stared in shock, while Leng Er's eyes lit up, dumbly staring at everything in the room. It was a very large bedroom with a very large bed and many, many dolls. The dolls all looked quite old, and they were not very aesthetically pleasing, but they were arranged nicely without even a speck of dust on them. The different types of dolls seemed to fill every corner of the room, and walking into here made one feel as if they had walked into a world of dolls. So many dolls, so many, Leng Er softly muttered as she looked ahead of her. However, she did not rush over to touch and hug them. Instead, she just stared, her eyes looking quite hazy, because a feeling told her that it wasn't the first time that she had seen this bedroom and all of these dolls. This was the princess's room in the past, and no one has lived in here for over 10,000 years, the undead granny said. All of the dolls here are part of the princess's collection, and they're all still here. Over the past 10,000 years, Lord Underworld King would come here every few days and use his power to maintain the room and everything inside it so that none of the dolls would decay. Over the years, the Underworld King's residence has gone through hundreds of renovations, but Lord Underworld King would never allow anyone to touch this room, much less the things inside it, nor has he allowed anyone to enter. After speaking, the undead granny's eyes misted up. Lord Underworld King has missed the princess so much over the years. He hasn't been happy for a whole 10,000 years. As she wiped her tears, the undead granny left and closed the door. Within the peaceful room, only Ling Chen, who was filled with melancholic feelings, and Leng Er, who continued to stare around her, were left. A night in the Underworld royal city. The things that the Underworld King had done today had been completely incomprehensible to Ling Chen, but now that he had time to calm down and think about it, he was unable to feel any condescension. Even though he was the Underworld King, he was a father, and definitely wouldn't do anything that would harm his daughter. This room, that he had maintained for 10,000 years, showed a father's love for his daughter, which was as steady as a mountain. There were many reasons for him to make the somewhat ridiculous decision that he had made today. He said that one of them was to help Leng Er recover her memory, but a more important one was that after reading Leng Er's memory, he knew about Ling Chen's status, background, as well as the fact that he had the lunar scourge. He also knew Ling Chen's purpose in coming to the underworld, as well as that he was unable to stay here. Moreover, becoming the lunar scourge meant that he would become a Shura. This was something that both Chi Yu and the White Tiger had told him about. As the Underworld King who had personally experienced the Shura's devastation 10,000 years ago, he also knew this. In that case, the Shura was definitely one of the considerations for wanting to hurry this entire matter so much. Alright, all of these things weren't important. The important thing was, how were they going to spend this night? The Underworld King had raged about Ling Chen helping Leng Er recover her memories, so that she could at last call him father. However, Leng Er's appearance was undoubtedly extremely cute and pretty. She liked dolls, and she herself looked like an exquisitely beautiful doll. However, Even though she was over 10,000 years old, her mind was still like that of a young girl's. So Ling Chen simply didn't know how to act. Lang'er had already begun floating around the room, continuously caressing each of the dolls. Her eyes were incredibly hazy, and it was evident that although her soul was incomplete and her memories were dormant, she still felt that these dolls were quite familiar. This was the same as when she had stared at the Underworld Blood Lake. After a while, she floated towards the large bed and landed on the blanket, which was embroidered with many beautiful pictures. The blanket was an extremely luxurious item that most undead in the Underworld had never seen before. "Do you feel like this place feels quite familiar?" Ling Chen sat on the bed and spoke to Lang'er, who was caressing the blanket. Lang'er looked up and softly replied before moving over and resting her head against his right arm, saying in a gentle voice, "Master, tell stories." After her favorability towards him rose to 40, Lang'er liked to be close to him when they were alone together, and she would practically stick onto him as she listened to stories. Ling Chen was still feeling conflicted as to whether he really would do anything with Lang'er. After all, it was so quiet here, and there was a bed. His father-in-law forcing him was also stuck in his mind. As Lang'er came near, a faint fragrance entered his nose, causing all sorts of thoughts to rush into his head as his breathing became somewhat ragged. He turned to look at Lang'er, who was incredibly close. She was kneeling on the blanket, resting the top half of her body against Ling Chen's arm. In her position, her clothes naturally hung loose, and as Ling Chen turned to look at her, he could see a white suppleness as well as an alluring, shallow valley, causing him to stare. Lang'er looked at Ling Chen's strange expression with confusion. She followed his gaze and looked at her chest, then coyly swung Ling Chen's arm as she repeated the request she made every day. "Master, tell stories." Ling Chen gulped down a mouthful of saliva as some wicked thoughts spread in his mind like a flood, unable to be stopped. He looked at Lang'er's pure and naive face as he asked, "Lang'er, let's not listen to stories today. How about we play a game?" "Game?" Lang'er looked quite confused. It's a game. That Lang'er will like a lot." It didn't matter to Ling Chen whether Lang'er understood at all. Facing Lang'er, he found that the obstructions in his heart were gone. Perhaps there had been no obstructions from the start apart from the reluctance to give in to the Underworld King. "We need to take off our clothes to play this game. Lang'er, can you take off your clothes?" Ling Chen looked into Lang'er's pure eyes, speaking as if he were a big gray wolf tempting a little white rabbit. "Take off clothes?" Lang'er lowered her head and looked at her clothes before blinking with her black eyes as she naively asked, "Is Master also going to take off clothes?" We're both going to take off our clothes. Lang'er, do it like this." Ling Chen gave a pure smile, but there was a hint of wickedness within it. As he spoke, he unequipped all of his equipment. In the virtual world, taking off one's clothes was much faster than in the real world. It took only an instant. Seeing Ling Chen take off all of his clothes, Lang'er's lips parted and dumbly stared at him for a while. Afterwards, she lowered her hands as a black light appeared around her clothes, and her clothes disappeared along with Ling Chen's. Instantly, a petite, snow-white, and flawless figure was revealed to Ling Chen's eyes. The Underworld King had clearly told him that although the Underworld King was the Emperor of the Underworld, they were not undead, but a very confusing type of creature. Lang'er's skin was not at all like those of an undead's. It was not horrifyingly white nor white-green, but it was instead snow-white like white jade, and so supple that anyone would want to touch it. Although the Underworld King had repeatedly said that Lang'er was over 10,000 years old, and therefore hundreds of times older than Ling Chen, she still looked like a petite young girl. She had 2 small mounds on her chest without any proud curves. However, she still looked incredibly beautiful with her 2 small jade bowls, and the 2 dots on them glistening with a pink color, looking like gemstones. Her slim waistline was simply exquisite, and she had two slim and long legs. They seemed to be tightly closed in anxiousness, but Ling Chen could still see how white they were. Her two small, white feet lay on the blanket, her toes like fresh flower petals and delicate as gems. Ling Chen's breathing became more hurried. He never thought that such a beautiful figure would be underneath her black dress. Although flames of desire burned within him, he didn't dare to move too quickly for fear of scaring Lang'er. Instead, he gradually leaned forwards, bringing his face closer and closer to Lang'er's. Lang'er had no idea what was going on, but remembering the game Ling Chen mentioned, so she did not try to escape. While she was wondering about what was going on, her small, pink lips were kissed by Ling Chen. Just like that, she had given away her first kiss. Lang'er's lips were soft, tender, and slightly cool. Ling Chen opened her nervously closed teeth with practiced ease and sucked Lang'er's little tongue, causing her sweet saliva to flow into his mouth. The strange feeling made Lang'er's breathing become ragged, and she did not move at all as her tongue entwined with Ling Chen's. Without realizing it, her body became softer, and she hurriedly pushed Ling Chen again, feeling incredibly flustered. Lang'er! Being pushed away by Lang'er like this, Ling Chen regained some clarity and looked at Lang'er, who had a hazy look in her eyes, and he couldn't help but feel guilty. Lang'er deeply breathed in and out, not knowing why she felt so flustered, and she didn't know why her body felt so soft. She looked at Ling Chen with a dazed expression before taking the initiative to kiss Ling Chen's face. After lightly touching his face with her lips, she quickly ducked away and continued to stare at Ling Chen. Is this a game? Is it fun? Ling Chen lightly touched the place where Lang'er had kissed him. Lang'er thought for a long time, thinking back to that strange feeling, before lightly nodding. It's fun. Then shall we continue playing? It'll become more fun. Ling Chen's eyes burned as he looked at Lang'er, his hand stealthily creeping towards her soft breasts. A round softness entered his hand, and her breasts were so supple that he felt as if they had been covered with sweet and refreshing spring water. He rubbed the small bud with his palm, causing it to become perkier as he rubbed it. Is this also part of the game? Feeling a strange sensation from her chest, Lang'er's body started to tremble. She spoke with a misty voice, and she could feel her heart beating faster and faster as her body became hotter and hotter. Her body also started to subconsciously twist around. Ling Chen put his arms around Lang'er's tender body and pressed her against his chest, using his body to feel her silky and tender skin as he moved his hand around her body. No matter where his hands felt, they were filled with a cool softness. After kissing her snow-white face, he softly spoke into her ear. Of course it is. However, this is only the beginning of the game. Lang'er felt an itchiness spread from her ears to the rest of her body, and her petite frame became taut from the strange new feelings. As Ling Chen continued to move his hands around, her heart tensed and relaxed repeatedly. She completely didn't understand what sort of game this was, but she allowed Ling Chen to do as he wished. Slowly, her body and mind were immersed in the game, and she subconsciously desired that the game would continue and not stop. In the end, her mind felt incredibly fuzzy, and both her body and mind had completely entered her first game. It was not until she felt a sudden hint of pain that she opened her eyes and stiffened her body, tightly wrapping her arms around Ling Chen's neck. It hurts. Lang'er's eyes were filled with tears as she curled up against Ling Chen's body like an injured kitten, looking incredibly wronged. It's okay. It won't hurt anymore soon. In the future when we play this game, it won't hurt anymore, Ling Chen said in a soft voice as he petted Lang'er's soft back, not moving at all. A few tears fell from Lang'er's eyes, and after a while, she spoke with an incredibly lovable voice that could break anyone's heart. Just like in the Forgotten Continent, There was no darkness in the Underworld, or to put it another way, it was always night in the Underworld. The night in the Underworld merely referred to a period of time. During the first night Ling Chen spent in the Underworld Royal City, he spent the first half of the night gently playing the game with Lung Er, and he played for a long time. During the latter half of the night, he hugged Lung Er's soft and petite body as they slept together. By now, all of the high-grade undead that had celebrated in the Underworld King's residence for most of the night had left. The Underworld King was still wide awake, and he sat in the central hall of the Underworld King's residence, standing guard against anyone who could possibly dare to disturb his daughter and son-in-law. He muttered to himself, "Surely that boy can do it. What do I do if he doesn't do anything during the entire night? Maybe I should ask Qian Gun to go to the Forgotten Continent and buy some high-grade aphrodisiac." When Ling Chen woke up, it was about 8:45 a.m., and it was already daytime in the real world. No matter what time it was always quite dark in the Underworld. When Ling Chen woke, his movements also disturbed the girl in his embrace. During the night, she had not been sent back to the pet space, but she had instead cuddled with Ling Chen as they slept. She had woken up earlier than Ling Chen, and after feeling Ling Chen's movements, she opened her eyes and started mumbling. She stretched out her body, revealing her jade-like body, as she hugged Ling Chen's arm. She then once again closed her eyes, feeling incredibly safe and peaceful. Looking at Lung Er beside him, and thinking back to what had happened during the night, Ling Chen spaced out for a while. When he came back to his senses, he looked at the time, and then at the light from outside, gently lifting the blanket covering them and saying, "Lung Er, it's time to get up." After the blanket was lifted up, her petite and flawless body was revealed. Her skin looked just as white even under the dim lighting, causing Ling Chen to stare. He couldn't help but stretch his hand towards her body and feel her suppleness, and after feeling this, he felt reluctant to move his hand away. He started to greedily play with her naked body, and his groping became more and more intense, causing the half-awake Lung Er begin breathing raggedly. "Ah!" Lung Er softly moaned like a kitten's mew, and she opened her eyes, looking at Ling Chen hazily, and spoke with a soft voice. "Master, are we going to play the game again? Does Lung Er like playing that game?" Ling Chen softly played with her cotton-like chest and gem-like buds, feeling the slight trembles through her body as an undetectable lecherous smile appeared on his face. Lung Er nodded, looking incredibly pure. Ling Chen smiled. "Compared to hearing stories, which one does Lung Er prefer?" Lung Er blinked as if she was trying to compare the two. However, not too long later, she said in a soft voice, "Playing the game. Do you want to play the game regularly then?" Ling Chen smiled wider as he moved his hand from Lung Er's chest towards her legs. Lung Er's trembling became even more intense, and she subconsciously caught Ling Chen's hand between her thighs. A pink glow appeared on her face as she breathed deeply, saying the answer Ling Chen wanted to hear. "Okay." Ling Chen grinned and tossed the blanket away. Lung Er helped as he lifted her bottom up, spreading her tender, white legs on either side of him, saying, "Let's play now then." After the previous night's experience, Lung Er knew what was about to happen, and she started to pant as she tightly closed her eyes. Her cheeks became red as she raised her bottom in nervousness and anticipation, her small feet continuously trembling. Ding! Your pet Lung Er's favorability towards you +12. By the time Ling Chen took Lung Er back to the hall, it was past 10 a.m. Lung Er was dressed the same way as before and had the same expression, but there was a subtle hint of something extra in her gaze, the traces from the game she had played. Her face was no longer pure white, and it instead had some hints of pink, making her look incredibly cute and enchanting. The Underworld King seemed to be waiting for them, and when he saw Ling Chen and Lung Er come out, he immediately went over and laughed as he yelled out, How did son-in-law do sleep last night? Before Ling Chen could reply, the Underworld King leaned over and looked at little Ling, looking hesitant as if he was afraid that his loud voice would scare her. Chen, did you sleep well last night? Was the bed comfortable? Even though the Underworld King had done his best to look as warm and affectionate as possible, his appearance, which could scare any young girl, caused Ling to subconsciously retreat behind Ling Chen. The Underworld King stared, and he started pulling at his hair, looking incredibly downcast. Ling Chen couldn't stay calm, and he asked in a small voice, Underworld King, didn't you say, ahem, if we did that, Ling would regain her memories? How come she still doesn't recognize you? Last night, I did exactly as you said. When Ling Chen said these things, he felt a bit guilty and angry. Guilty because he had slept with his daughter, a girl who looked too young. Angry because he had slept with her, but it was because of what the Underworld King had said. It was the Underworld King who had said her memories could be recovered. It wasn't his fault that her memories weren't back. The Underworld King waved his hand, giving a nonchalant "oh," and casually replied, Her memories aren't back yet? That's all right. How could they come back so easily? Ling Chen instantly felt as if he had been played, and he took a step forwards as he unhappily said, Underworld King, you mean you knew that Ling wouldn't regain her memories today? So you were lying to me yesterday? The Underworld King gave him a sideways glance as he replied, not feeling guilty at all. How could it be so easy to restore a soul that was damaged 10,000 years ago? Even if a true God still existed, it would take them at least 3 to 5 days. Then were the things you told me about Ling being able to recover her memories and remember you as her father if I consummated with her all a load of nonsense. That I was too happy to see Chen yesterday, and I remembered incorrectly. That must have been what happened. The Underworld King was indeed someone who had lived for a long time, and his face didn't become red nor did his heart beat faster. I checked the Underworld King collection last night, and found that even if she consummates with the person who she has a soul sacrifice contract with, it'll be impossible for her soul to recover in a short period of time. However, the Underworld King patted Ling Chen's arm, giving him a look of encouragement and pleading. This is the best method that doesn't have any risks or side effects. Then how long will it take? Let me think. If you consummate once every day, it'll take about a year, the Underworld King said in a deadly earnest manner. Ling Chen started. Good son-in-law, I'll leave this to you. For my daughter, and for your life, do your best. The Underworld King patted Ling Chen's shoulder, looking at him deeply. Ling Chen felt his mouth twitch and couldn't speak for a while, encouraging a man to do his best, and he had mentioned that they needed to do it once per day. This father was so goddamn fudge. If Ling didn't have the Underworld King's power, Ling Chen would have begun to suspect whether the Underworld King really was her father. That's right. I saw the reason why you came to the Underworld from Chen memories. You seem to be seeking the Lunar Scourge's orbs. The Lunar Scourge. When he said that name, the Underworld King's eyes flashed. The Lunar Scourge is an incredibly terrifying yet desirable item. Back then, the cause of the Shura's devastation was the Lunar Scourge. The Shura it can cause even the heavens to tremble. It's said that if one is controlled by the Lunar Scourge, he will become a Shura who only wants to kill. However, if one can instead control the Lunar Scourge, he will be able to use the Lunar Scourge's power while also possessing the Shura's power. After hearing various legends and seeing the power that the Shura displayed back then, I once wanted the Lunar Scourge. Afterwards, that desire gradually disappeared. However, I can see that although you have the Lunar Scourge, you're not controlled by it. In that case, it must be that you have controlled the Lunar Scourge. The Underworld King looked at Ling Chen deeply as he said, Good son-in-law, well done. Ling Chen, you came to the Underworld to search for the Lunar Scourge orbs, right? Could it be that the orb you want is in the Underworld Blood Lake? If that's the case, you can go look for it at any time. Take these scrolls. They'll allow you to directly reach the Underworld Blood Lake's boundary. As he spoke, the Underworld King took out 3 scrolls and handed them to Ling Chen. Spatial Scroll, Underworld Blood Lake, a special spatial scroll created by the Underworld King's powerful Underworld King power. After crushing the scroll, the user will tear open a spatial tunnel to the Underworld Blood Lake. Can only be used while not in battle. Ling Chen put away the scrolls and said, "Thank you, Underworld King. Just like you said, I'm here to look for the Lunar Scourge's orbs. There might be one within the Underworld Blood Lake." The Underworld King frowned before complaining. "You've already wedded my daughter. Shouldn't you be calling me father-in-law? Can you please answer one of my questions?" Ling Chen earnestly asked. "What is it?" The Underworld King replied, "What was the real reason why you wanted to marry Ling to me so eagerly?" The Underworld King looked at Ling Chen deeply and used a tone that Ling Chen couldn't recognize. "The true reason, when the day comes, you'll naturally know. You only need to know that I'll never harm my daughter. Because my daughter's life is tied to yours, I will never harm you either." The Underworld King stopped speaking, and his tone changed as he impatiently yelled, "All right, go do what you need to do. Go find that orb or go take a walk around this city. I have things to do, so I won't be staying with you any longer." After speaking, the Underworld King swung his sleeve and strode away, afraid that Ling Chen would continue to ask him questions. Leo, Capricorn 1. The Underworld Royal City was quite large, and it wasn't smaller than the Forgotten City. As a living creature, Ling Chen was an extremely rare existence in the Underworld Royal City. Of course, that was with the exception of the Underworld merchant Qian Gun. And now, his status had become even more special, the Underworld King's son-in-law. As such, when Ling Chen and Ling appeared in the Underworld Royal City, all of the high-grade undead treated them extremely respectfully, and would hurry over from a great distance away to pay their respects. There was even a large group of high-grade undead fighting to take Ling Chen and Ling for a tour around the Underworld Royal City. The Underworld Royal City wasn't a very lively place, and it had a heavy deathly aura everywhere. After walking around for a while, Ling Chen started to feel bored, and he started to head towards the business street. There were not many shops on the business street. At most there were some small stalls with strangely dressed undead selling all kinds of weird things. Ling Chen walked to the first stall and looked at some strangely shaped loudspeakers. Low sound quality speaker, a low-quality speaker made from poor-quality underworld sound stones. When speaking into it, one will be able to transmit their voice to the surrounding 10 kilometers. Price, 3 underworld coins. High sound quality speaker, a high-quality speaker made from high-quality underworld sound stones. When speaking into it, one will be able to transmit their voice to the surrounding 100 kilometers. Price, 20 underworld coins. Super quality sound cannon, an ultimate speaker made from super underworld sound stones. It has unimaginable broadcasting abilities. When speaking into it, one will be able to transmit their voice to the surrounding 1,000 kilometers. Price, 600 underworld coins. Can only buy one. After casually looking through their effects, Ling Chen, who was just about to leave, suddenly stopped. Speakers that could transmit one's voice to 100 or even 1,000 kilometers. What superb items! Ling Tian City needed a way to conveniently give announcements throughout the entire city. With these speakers, this problem would be perfectly solved. Ling Chen looked at his underworld coins. After killing large numbers of vampiric undead in the Path of Darkness, and the 3 Heavens End grade bosses in the Ice Purgatory, Ling Chen currently had 23,000 Underworld coins. As such, he unhesitatingly bought 10 high sound quality speakers and 1 super quality sound cannon. After returning, he would give each of the leaders of the city a speaker, making it incredibly convenient for them to make citywide announcements. At the second stall were all sorts of strange stones. After looking at the first stone's description, Ling Chen was shocked. Void Underworld Stone, a stone that can release a mysterious space under certain conditions. They are found under the Underworld's tall mountains and are extremely hard to find. They are even worth the value of entire cities. After putting it into one's bag, it increases the item space by 60,000 spaces. Price: 6,000 Underworld coins. 60,000 spaces. This mysterious stone could increase the number of spaces in his bag by a whole 60,000. This essentially meant that Ling Chen would have an unlimited inventory. Ling Chen currently had the emptying rock that he had bought from Qian Gun for a high price, which gave him an extra 300 spaces. Ling Chen already had the largest expansion for his bag, but he obtained items too quickly. Even with the emptying rock, he was unable to keep everything. As such, he often needed to throw away equipment and items. However, with this Void Underworld Stone, he would never have to worry about his inventory again. Although the Void Underworld Stone costed an expensive 6,000 Underworld coins, it was definitely worth it, so Ling Chen instantly bought it. As Ling Chen walked from one end of the business street to the other, he felt more surprise and shock with every step he took. The things here were weird and wonderful, and they had all sorts of effects. What's more, most of these things were quite common in the Underworld, and not very useful to the powerful undead. However, to Ling Chen, who came from the Forgotten Continent, they were completely different. Most of the things here were complete trash in the Underworld, but in the Forgotten Continent, especially to players, they would be a part of an incredibly rare treasure trove. Why was the Underworld merchant Qian Gun famous everywhere under the heavens? Why did countless people desire to meet him and buy the things he had to sell? It was because Qian Gun had many items from the Underworld that living beings could not obtain by themselves. The living world and the undead world were two completely different worlds, and the things that appeared within them were naturally different. Ordinary things in one world could very well be priceless treasures in the other. Standing at the end of the business street, Ling Chen's eyes lit up. A business opportunity. A massive business opportunity. The rubbish that Qian Gun could casually find in the Underworld was all sold for astronomical prices in the Forgotten Continent, and there were countless people fighting to buy them, causing his name to be incredibly renowned. In that case, what if he bought things en masse from the Underworld and sold them in Ling Tian City? This was naturally impossible for other people because living creatures couldn't even enter the Underworld, and undead who left the Underworld would become zombies that could only follow the Underworld King's command. After so many years, the only person who could do this was Qian Gun, and to the current Ling Chen, wanting to do this was simply too easy. With Ling Er's Underworld King power, he could safely enter the Underworld. What's more, he was the Underworld King's son-in-law. This was a status that was recognized by the Underworld King himself, and everyone in the Underworld knew about it. Ling Chen thought of ways to bring things from the Underworld to Ling Tian City in bulk, as well as how to bring some of the Forgotten Continent's ordinary things to the Underworld. That way both sides would benefit, and adding in Ling Er's relationship with the Underworld King, how could he refuse? After making this decision, Ling Chen decided to think about this matter in the future. It would be no problem gaining the Underworld King's approval, so it would be quite easy to facilitate the trade. After bringing Ling Er to take a look around the Underworld Royal City, Ling Chen took out one of the spatial scrolls that the Underworld King had given him. Before leaving the Underworld Royal City, he subconsciously looked up at the unnatural-looking red sky to the west of the Underworld royal city, before crushing the scroll. Ding! You have arrived in the dangerous region Underworld Blood Lake. As the space around them changed, the Underworld royal city was replaced with the Underworld Blood Lake. Within Ling Chen's vision was the bubbling water, and after coming here again, Ling Chen's feelings were completely different. He no longer felt any danger or worry. After all, he could come to this forbidden area whenever he wanted, and he could leave whenever he wanted. Xiao Hui Snow Cherry. Ling Chen put Xiao Hui onto Snow Cherry's back as they lifted off into the air. Xiao Hui stood on Snow Cherry's neck, his horn lighting up as soon as he appeared. Ling Chen immediately asked, Xiao Hui, have you found it? Hurry and find its location. Ling Chen softly barked and turned around a few times before pointing his horn towards Ling Chen's right. Snow Cherry immediately changed direction towards where Xiao Hui was pointing. The further ahead they flew, the brighter the glow on Xiao Hui's horn became. When the brightness reached its maximum, Xiao Hui barked and Snow Cherry stopped there. Is it here? Ling Chen looked down at the blood-red water, and after confirming the place, he said to Ling Er, Ling Er will be relying on you. Out of all of them, only Ling Er could go into the Underworld Blood Lake. After playing the game with Ling Chen all night, she became much more obedient. She meekly nodded and lightly floated down, submerging into the Underworld Blood Lake. Ling Chen looked down and waited excitedly. Which orb would it be this time? Out of the mysterious God-grade orbs, the Leo orb, Capricorn orb, and Aries orb were still left. Chi said that the Leo orb was for physical attack power, the Capricorn orb was for magic attack power, and the Aries orb was useless before becoming a Shura, but after becoming a Shura, it would be more useful than the 3 Saint Destroyer grade orbs. So which one would it be? Ling Chen didn't have to wait too long. As the water rippled, Ling Er broke through the water. Just as Ling Chen was about to call out to her, his expression froze, because Ling Er wasn't holding an orb, and the lunar scourge on his wrist wasn't giving off any light. What was going on? Xiao Hui's detection abilities had never failed him before. Could it be that the Underworld Blood Lake was too deep, and there were too many things submerged underwater so Ling Er couldn't find it or couldn't bring it out? Ling Er, you didn't find it. Ling Chen held Ling Er's hand as he asked in a comforting tone. However, he suddenly saw that Ling Er was holding a heavy, jet-black piece of metal. What's this? Ling Chen took it into his hands. The instant it came into contact with his hands, the incredible feeling of heaviness suddenly appeared, causing Snow Cherry's body to fall by half a body position before stabilizing. Ling Chen spent a great deal of effort holding it, and he found that it was not completely black. It actually contained a layer of dark red within the blackness. The dark red color made him think of the color of extremely thick blood after it had dried. It was fairly flat and thick, but it had a hidden sharpness. It had a zigzag running along it, making it look like a fragment of a large sword. Wait, this color, heaviness, and shape, could it be? Shura Emperor Sword Shard 4. 10,000 years ago, the famous Qi Sword Emperor fell into the way of the Shura, and the sword he used became the Shura Emperor's Sword, after being bathed in the blood of countless beings. After becoming a Shura, the Qi Sword Emperor's sole purpose was to slaughter, and he massacred countless creatures, causing a disaster everywhere under the heavens. In the end, he was punished by the heavens, and he was attacked by the Void Dragon God and the 3 Moon Goddesses Fate, Order, and Freedom, dying at their hands. The 3 Moon Goddesses tried to completely destroy the Shura Emperor's sword, but they were unable to do so, so they split it into 5 segments and separated them so that they could never be brought together. As expected, this was yet another shard of the strongest sword from the legends, the Shura Emperor's sword that the Shura had used to take countless lives. Together with the ones he had already obtained, this was the fourth shard. He had obtained the first one from the forgotten cave in the novice village. The second one was found at the war god's trial grounds, and the third one was found in the dwarf's palace. Now, he had obtained the fourth shard. He had heard many stories about the Shura Emperor's sword, and he felt a sense of curiosity towards it. He had never actively tried to find the sword shards, but they seemed to be attracted to him. After putting the shard away, Ling Chen's attention once again fell on Xiao Hui. After Ling Chen obtained the Shura Emperor's sword shard, Xiao Hui's horn dimmed, but the glow did not disappear when Ling Chen put it away. Xiao Hui once again turned, and he faced towards the center of the Underworld blood lake this time. Xiao Hui's detection abilities were extremely reliable and precise, but he could only determine where the items were, not what they were. In other words, what he had pointed them towards before was the Shura Emperor's sword shard, so this time it should be the Lunar Scourge's orb. Snow Cherry, let's go! Leo, Capricorn, 2. When they arrived above the center of the Underworld blood lake, the light on Xiao Hui's horn became incredibly bright. Ling Chen looked down at the peaceful lake and thought, Su's information has never been wrong before. Just then we coincidentally obtained a Shura Emperor sword shard, so this time it should be an orb. Lungair, we'll have to trouble you again. Lungair lightly nodded, and once again sank into the Underworld blood lake. Half a minute later, she rose up with something in her hands. This time, the lunar scourge on Ling Chen's wrist suddenly let out a piercing silver glow. You found it! Ling Chen cheered. This was the reaction that the lunar scourge gave when an orb was nearby. He quickly pulled Lungair over, and saw the silver-white orb in her hands. Its shape, color, and faint light that it gave off meant that it was definitely one of the lunar scourge's orbs. Ling Chen immediately took it into his hands. This was now the 10th lunar scourge orb that he had found. Finding the lunar scourge's orbs had seemed like an impossible task, but in less than a year, because of various factors and a lot luck, he had come closer and closer to achieving it. Ling Chen brought the orb in front of him and looked at its stats. Leo orb type, energy orb, grade, mysterious god, attributes, fire. Equipment requirements, can only be socketed in the lunar scourge. Effects, physical attack power plus 100% for user and pets. Ling Chen marveled silently. The lion was the king of beasts, and it represented might and vigor. Its powerful battle abilities allowed it to stand above hundreds of other kinds of animals, so it was not surprising that its effects were to increase physical attack power. Qiyu had told him about this before, but the amount it gave still shocked Ling Chen. And 100% increase to physical attack power meant that his physical attack power would be doubled. And this was not only for himself, but also for his pets as well. This orb boosted his and his pet's physical attack power to a whole new level. Ling Chen's attacks were dependent on his physical attack power, and in his strongest state, his physical attack power was incredibly terrifying to the point that it had reached the mysterious god grade level. With the Leo orb, his physical attack power was now close to the Saint Destroyer grade. It was as if he had shed his mortal body and exchanged his bones. After happily looking at the Leo orb, Ling Chen took off the super strength crystal and prepared to socket the Leo orb. However, at that moment, Ling Chen noticed something else in Lungair's hands. It was the same size and shape as the Leo orb, and it glowed with the same light. The only difference was that the symbols on them were different, causing Ling Chen's eyes to widen. Ling Chen stared at the Leo orb in his hands, and then gulped as he stretched his hand out and put the other object next to the Leo orb, dumbly staring at the two orbs in his hands that Lungair had found. Could it be that this was also Capricorn orb, type, energy orb, grade, mysterious god, attribute, water, equipment requirements, can only be socketed in the lunar scourge. Effects, magic attack power plus 100% for user and pets. Ling Chen's jaw dropped as he stared for a whole 3 seconds before dumbly saying, "Goddamn, this is incredible!" The Leo Orb and Capricorn Orb. 2 orbs. He had found 2 orbs at once within the Underworld Blood Lake. Obtaining each of the Lunar Scourge's orbs was incredibly dangerous and difficult. Each step he had taken to restore the Lunar Scourge was incredibly arduous. However, he had never thought that he would suddenly take 2 steps in one go this time. What's more, the Leo Orb and Capricorn Orb had similar effects. One greatly increased physical attack power, while the other greatly increased magic attack power, and they both affected his pets as well. Now that he thought about it, it was only fitting that they appeared together. The Capricorn Orb's boost was only useful for Ling Chen's, Thunder God's Bulwark, but it was incredibly useful for his pets. Out of his 5 pets, Kair, Lingair, and Xiling were all pure magic attack types. The Capricorn Orb greatly boosted their healing, crowd control, and attack abilities. Snow Cherry's physical attack power and magic attack power weren't weak either, and she also benefited greatly. The simultaneous discovery of 2 orbs was an extremely pleasant surprise for Ling Chen, making him feel incredibly happy. He kissed Lingair's soft, pink face, and then socketed the Leo Orb and Capricorn Orb onto the Lunar Scourge. Ding! The Leo Orb has been successfully socketed. Physical attack power plus 100% for you and your pets. Ding! The Lunar Scourge's unique lunar skill, Eternal Moon Shadow, has been unlocked. Ding! The Capricorn Orb has been successfully socketed. Magic attack power plus 100% for you and your pets. After socketing the 2 orbs, he had also unlocked a new lunar skill. Now, out of the 12 mysterious god-grade orbs, he had found 11 of them. Apart from the socket for the Aries Orb, which still had a super speed crystal, all of the other sockets had a mysterious god-grade orb within them. Ling Chen looked at the Lunar Scourge before excitedly looking at the new lunar skill. Eternal Moon Shadow creates a shadow that can cover all creatures under the bright moonlight. When the moonlight is integrated with the Lunar Scourge's moon shadow, it causes all beings to fall silent. Effects: a super large range freezing technique. Range is determined by the size of the moon. Cannot be used when there is no moon, new moon, or crescent moon. Maximum range for half moon is 3,000 meters. Maximum range for waxing moon is 10,000 meters. Maximum range for full moon is 30,000 meters, and maximum range for broken moon is 600 million meters. Once activated, unless the moonlight disappears, the effects will not end. Cost 3 MP, cooldown time 1 month. The Eternal Moon Shadow's effects shocked Ling Chen. Moon Shadow's effects were incredibly powerful. It was able to freeze even mysterious god-grade beings for a whole 5 seconds, making it one of the skills that Ling Chen relied on the most. When facing powerful enemies, it had been of great assistance time and time again. In fact, it could be said that if Ling Chen didn't have the godly Moon Shadow skill, it was likely that he wouldn't have been able to get where he was now in such a short amount of time. The Eternal Moon Shadow's effects were the same as Moon Shadow's. However, while Moon Shadow only lasted for 5 seconds, the effects of Eternal Moon Shadow could last forever. The description had clearly stated that if the moon did not disappear, the effects would continue. Everything would remain frozen unless the moon disappeared. This sort of skill was simply terrifying. If Ling Chen used this skill, even if he were facing a Saint Destroyer grade expert, he would be able to freeze them permanently and kill them as he wanted. As long as he could cast this skill, there would be no enemy that could stand up against him. Even if he met the Moon God clan's 3 moon goddesses, he wouldn't have to fear them. Every time that the Lunar Scourge received an extra orb, it became more powerful. However, although it was incredibly powerful, it was not to a level that was unacceptable, nor did it reach the invincible level that Qi Yu had talked about. However, now that Ling Chen had returned 11 orbs to the lunar scourge, Ling Chen saw just how heaven-defying it truly was. This shocking skill had a heaven-defying effect, yet it only had a 1-month cooldown time. However, it hurt to see that the eternal moon shadow required at least a half-moon to activate. Right now, he could only release a new moon, not even a crescent moon. This meant that he could look at the skill but not use it. Ling Chen wanted to savagely curse at the lunar scourge. Why'd you unlock it if I can't even use it yet? Are you trying to piss me up? What was even worse was that after obtaining 11 orbs, the lunar scourge could still only release the new moon, and it had not upgraded to the crescent moon. Surely it wouldn't take all 12 mysterious god great orbs to upgrade it to crescent moon? In that case, didn't it mean that he would need at least one of the Saint Destroyer orbs to upgrade it to half moon? Now that Ling Chen had obtained the 2 mysterious god grade orbs from the Underworld Blood Lake, his goal in coming to the Underworld Blood Lake was complete. He did not stay at the Underworld Blood Lake, and he instead used a spatial scroll to return to the Underworld Royal City. Since he had achieved his goal, it was time to leave. It seemed that the Underworld King knew that Ling Chen would take Ling'er and leave after achieving his goal. Perhaps that was one of the reasons why he had quickly arranged for them to be married. As such, he probably wouldn't force him to stay. It was just that Ling Chen decided that he should talk some business as well as take care of some other things before leaving. Returning to the Underworld King's residence, Ling Chen saw the Underworld King sitting on a gigantic skeleton chair, holding an ancient text in his hands. When he saw Ling Chen and Ling'er come over, he casually threw the ancient text to one side as he smiled at Ling'er, but he found that he still scared her. As such, he turned his gaze to Ling Chen. "Did you find what you came for?" I found it," Ling Chen replied in a straightforward manner. "That means—" The Underworld King paused and took a secret glance at Ling'er, who was hiding behind Ling Chen, as if he didn't want to say the second half. "You're going to leave with Chanair?" "That's right," Ling Chen nodded. "But don't worry, with Ling'er, I'll be able to come here as often as I please. If you miss Ling'er, I can bring her at any time." The Underworld King fell silent for a moment, and his expression suddenly became annoyed as he waved his hand. Whatever, if you want to leave, then you can just piss off then. This old man never said he was going to force you to stay here. My own daughter doesn't even recognize me as her father, and my son-in-law doesn't even call me father-in-law. If you want to go, then go. Otherwise, I'll feel annoyed just looking at you." Ling Chen was speechless. The old Underworld King's eyes had become red after seeing that Ling'er was going to leave, and he started to chase them out. At that moment, the sound of hurried steps sounded out as the person called out before he even entered the room. "Lord Underworld King, things are bad. Something big has happened. What are you making a fuss about?" The Underworld King sat with his back straight as he looked at the elderly undead who had just rushed in. The elderly undead knelt before the Underworld King's seat, breathing incredibly raggedly as he pointed outside and cried out, "Things are bad. Lord Blue Darkness, who has been standing guard at the Underworld volcano in the west, just passed on information that the Underworld volcano has erupted." "What?" When the Underworld King heard the word erupted, he shot to his feet, looking incredibly shocked. "It's 100% true. A massive flame shot into the sky from the Phoenix Mountain in the west, which can be seen anywhere within the city. Everyone in the city is incredibly scared, saying that it's the beginning of the Underworld volcano exploding. When the time comes, it's possible that the entire Underworld—" Before the elderly undead had finished speaking, the Underworld King rushed out with a berserk gust of cold wind. The Forgotten City's soldiers arrived. The Underworld Royal City's streets were filled with different types of undead. All of them looked at the red sky in the west, their faces filled with shock and fear. Because of the shocking scene developing in front of them, none of them even detected the Underworld King when he came beside them.
Underworld King, what's going on with the Underworld volcano that you were talking about?
Ling Chen asked as he looked towards the sky in the west. When he had first come to the Underworld Royal City, he had felt quite strange about the redness in the sky. This was because the sky he had seen was dark gray from the east of the Underworld to the Underworld Royal City, while the sky to the west of the Underworld Royal City was a strange red color. Furthermore, the temperature at the Underworld Royal City had been much higher than all of the other places he passed, which he had thought was linked to the red sky in the west. However, since Undead feared fire, how could there be such a hot place near the Underworld Royal City? By now, the sky in the west was no longer dark red, but a shocking crimson red color, and it looked as if it was burning. Looking over, one would find that there was a pillar of fire that extended to the sky quite some distance away that was spiraling around like a gigantic dragon. It was this that caused the Underworld Royal City's temperature to rise.
AI, this is the Underworld's fate. No matter how we run, we can't escape from it,
the Underworld King said as he gave a long sigh.
About 10,000 years ago, there was a large explosion around 400 kilometers away from the Underworld Royal City that could be heard even from the Underworld Royal City. I personally went to have a look and found a crater. Within the crater was something that shouldn't exist in the Underworld, lava.
Undead fear fire, and because the Underworld Royal Clan possesses the power of death, we also fear fire. With a dense deathly aura in the Underworld, it's extremely strange that lava would appear in the Underworld. However, I didn't pay it much heed back then, because the lava of unknown origin soon disappeared. Because it was quite hot there, I quickly ordered people to seal off that region to prevent undead from going in and being harmed, and I subsequently forgot about it.
Not only did the lava not disappear, but it also silently grew. 10 years later, a large fire erupted from there, and the temperature of the flames were simply terrifying, melting the surrounding ground and mountains. After the fire started burning, it was never extinguished, and it gradually spread more and more. It was only tens of meters at the start, but now it's a sea of flames over 200 kilometers long and has become the Underworld volcano. Undead are naturally fearful of fire and can be seriously injured by fire. Moreover, that fire isn't any ordinary fire, and it has extremely high temperatures. Even the 8 underworld gods are unable to go near. Not only this, but the fires never die down, and I've tried countless methods to suppress the fire. I even used my Underworld King power to suppress it, but I was only able to stop it temporarily. Soon after, it started to spread quickly again. In the end, there was nothing I could do, so I just let it be. I told the 8 underworld gods to stand guard at places near the underworld volcano in order to monitor it every day. The undead residents in the west have all been relocated. It looks like the underworld volcano's eruption this time will be even more intense than in the past 10,000 years. Looks like we'll have to also move the Underworld Royal City.
The Underworld King deeply sighed, feeling quite reluctant.
Although I'm the Underworld King and don't fear any of the experts in this world, I don't have the power to fight against nature. However, we don't know what the source of this fire is even to this day. If it continues to grow, in less than 10,000 years, no place in the underworld will be safe for undead. It's that serious?
Ling Chen felt quite surprised. He never thought that the mysterious and terrifying underworld would be in such a large crisis. The Underworld King waved his hand at him.
Forget it. You shouldn't be concerning yourself with such matters. Go do what you need to do, and we'll figure some way to handle it. Unless the situation is incredibly dire, we won't move the Underworld Royal City. If it really comes to that, we'll just create a new underworld.
When Ling Chen saw the deep frown on the Underworld King's face, he knew that creating a new underworld wasn't as easy as he had made it sound. At that moment, Ling Chen felt a restless stirring within his mind, and he called out,
Shi Ling, what's wrong? Master, where are we?
Shi Ling's voice came from the pet dimension.
We're in the Underworld Royal City. We haven't left the Underworld yet,
Ling Chen replied.
Underworld, so why?
Shi Ling sounded quite confused.
Did you discover something?
Ling Chen asked.
I can feel something calling me in the west, and my heart has been beating incredibly fast,
Shi Ling said hazily with some hesitation. Ling Chen looked at the crimson-red sky in the west and suddenly asked,
Shi Ling, are you able to put out fires? Put out fires? Like, for example, a large sea of flames. Are you able to absorb those flames or extinguish them in any way?
Ling Chen asked.
Of course I can. I excel in controlling fire elemental essence. No matter if it's creating fire or extinguishing fire, I can do it easily,
Shi Ling confirmed.
Good.
Ling Chen slowly nodded.
Then let's go to the west and see if we can find who's calling Shi Ling.
Ling Chen then said to the Underworld King,
Underworld King, how about you let me go to the Underworld volcano to have a look? Perhaps I'll be able to find the source of the fire. You?
The Underworld King looked at him before waving his hand.
Absolutely not. That's not a place you can go. You're underestimating the Underworld volcano. The flames there aren't ordinary flames, and they can melt even the ground and mountains. Even I don't dare to get too close. Going would just be throwing your life away. Don't worry.
Ling Chen patted his chest.
My body doesn't fear flames. There are no flames that can harm me.
What Ling Chen said was true. After Shi Ling reached the mysterious god grade, she gave Ling Chen and all of his other pets the heaven-defying status of not fearing flames. Because Shi Ling's body simultaneously contained the golden crow, phoenix, and vermilion bird's flames, she was undeniably the sovereign of all flames. With Shi Ling's protection, Ling Chen would not have to fear any flames in the world. However, these words sounded completely ludicrous to the Underworld King, and he instantly roared,
What a load of nonsense! Do you think you're the ancient phoenix or golden crow? You don't fear flames? Even those 3 women from the moon god clan don't dare to say such arrogant words. Don't think that you're invincible just because you killed Qi Xian Wu Hen. Even I, your father-in-law, wouldn't dare to touch those flames. You'll be turned into dust if you go.
Ling Chen smirked and did not say any more. He summoned Snow Cherry and jumped onto her back as he flew towards the west.
Underworld King, wait for my good news. If I can't do anything about it, I'll immediately leave and won't cause any harm to your daughter. Ollie, where are you going? Fudge, are you crazy? Goddamn, he's really going.
Snow Cherry was simply too fast, quickly becoming a white dot in the Underworld King's sight. He stamped his feet, his beard bristling.
This brat is simply too unruly. Although he has a good heart. Looks like I didn't marry my daughter to the wrong person.
All of the city gates and teleportation channels were tightly shut. Even the revival point was closed, and the bustling streets of Ling Tian City were completely empty, making Ling Tian City look like a dead city. The atmosphere in the central meeting hall was extremely grave.
Big Missly, can you honestly tell us what our chances are?
Skyfall asked while frowning deeply. They could not participate in this battle because they simply didn't have the right to participate. Only the Fairy Clan had the power to stop the Forgotten City's soldiers. However, not many people were familiar with the Fairy Clan's power, but from Yunmeng Xian and Li Xiaoshui's serious expressions, anyone could tell that the situation was quite grim.
We don't have a chance at all. We can only make a bet,
Li Xiaoshui slowly replied.
Within the Fairy Clan, Chief Greenwood is at the mysterious god grade. there are 14 fairies with heaven's end great power, and there are 103 with celestial great power. There are also 900 other fairies who are able to fight and are also quite strong.
After speaking, Li Xiaoshui lightly sighed.
If we purely compare the Forgotten Continent's humans' power to the fairies, humans are unable to fight against the fairies at all. However, all of the soldiers are the Forgotten City's elites, and not only do they have superior numbers, but they might even have peak-level experts, who are also at the mysterious god grade. The difference in strength between the elite soldiers and the fairies was already quite far apart, and there's also a massive difference in numbers.
Our only hope is that the other side does not have any mysterious god-grade experts. If that's the case, Chief Greenwood may be able to keep this situation under control with his power, so that we at least won't be broken through within a short period of time. Adding on the mountain giant's help, it's possible that we'll be able to successfully defend the city. However, if the other side also has mysterious god-grade experts who can tie Chief Greenwood up.
Li Xiaoshui did not continue to speak, but everyone understood the implications. If the other side also had mysterious god-grade experts, there would be no hope in protecting Ling Tian's city. However, even if they couldn't save the city, they wouldn't give in to the Forgotten City. Even if they lost, they wouldn't give up their dignity. An urgent sound came from Li Xiaoshui's communication device. She quickly glanced at it and frowned, saying in a serious tone,
"They're coming."
A minute later, everyone gathered on the West Gate's walls, looking at the Forgotten City's army that was quickly advancing from 10 kilometers away. The Forgotten Emperor had evidently guessed what Yunmeng Xian's reply would be and had brought his army of 100,000 soldiers. It was split into 3 columns with roughly 30,000 soldiers in each. Their levels and professions were all evident from their attire.
Turning the heavens and earth upside down, time passed second by second, and as the Forgotten City's soldiers came closer and closer, the formless pressure that they gave off became stronger and stronger. 1,000 fairies stood in ranks on the city walls, everyone holding a jade-green longbow. The fairies' light magic was focused on healing and buffs, and their nature magic was focused on crowd control. Their main source of attack power was focused on archery, because every fairy was a natural-born archer. In the distance, the Forgotten City's army finally arrived within the field of vision of those in Ling Tian's city. At the front was a mass of cavalry, the knights. The fairies raised their hands and drew the bowstrings back. Nature arrows formed from light energy materialized, pointing towards the evildoers who wanted to destroy their home. The knight stopped about half a kilometer away from the city gates, and a knight wearing jet-black armor rushed out. He came before the city gates and yelled,
"His Imperial Majesty wishes to give you another chance. Will you submit or resist?"
Yunmeng Xian coldly replied,
"Tell your Forgotten Emperor that we'd rather have Ling Tian's city be destroyed than for it to be ruined by him."
The knight roared back,
"Very well, I'll go and report your words to my lord. Since you must obstinately pursue the wrong path, don't blame us for bringing judgment onto Ling Tian's city."
The knight returned, and soon an ear-piercing horn sounded out, signaling the Forgotten City's army to attack. Instantly, the peaceful ground started to tremble as the 100,000 soldiers moved like a jet-black thundercloud, advancing towards the city gates that did not have a single person in front of it.
"Attack! Show no mercy!"
The fairies hated conflict, but Chief Greenwood maintained a cool expression when he gave the cruel command. They did not want to fight, but they had no choice but to fight. After all, only they had the power to protect Ling Tian's city from the Forgotten City's soldiers, who were like tigers and wolves. If they did not harden their hearts and fight, Ling Tian's city would definitely be destroyed. The densely packed nature arrows fell like rain towards the knights at the front. Against beings of about the same grade and level, the fairies' arrows were not incredibly powerful. However, their range, speed, accuracy, and precision greatly surpassed those of any other beings. 100 meters away, the 1,000 nature arrows all found their targets. Not a single arrow missed its mark, causing more than 100 knights to crash down from their warhorses, instantly causing mass chaos. A second and third wave of arrows then descended. However, although the fairies' nature arrows were powerful, there were only 1,000 of them. It was simply impossible for them to stop 100,000 soldiers. If they split up their attacks, they would not be able to affect the army at all, and if they condensed their attacks, they would only be able to put pressure on a small portion of the army. The 100,000 soldiers braved the rain of arrows, roaring as they quickly came closer. Soon, they were only 50 meters away from the city, and they swept towards the city gates with great momentum. On the city walls, Chief Greenwood finally acted. He floated down from the walls and landed in front of the city gate, coldly looking at the large army in front of him. The green light that had been gathered in his hands for a long time were sent shooting down towards the ground. In an instant, the ground trembled as the 200 meters in front of him erupted with countless green vines. They wrapped themselves around the warhorses' legs, causing the horses to scream as they fell while also heavily throwing off the knights on their backs. The vines continued to grow madly, wrapping around warhorses and knights alike, binding them to the ground. Within those 200 meters, thousands of knights were thrown to the ground, and no matter how they struggled, all they could do was be killed by the fairies' nature arrows.
As expected from the fairy clan's chief, he's so strong!
Xiaoqi shouted in shock, looking incredibly excited. A Heaven's End great expert could turn the tides of a battle, let alone a mysterious god great expert. Once Greenwood attacked, the momentum that the 100,000 soldiers had gathered was completely stopped. Adding on the fairies' merciless rain of arrows, the Forgotten City's army started to suffer more and more casualties. At that moment, a white figure suddenly flew out from within the Forgotten City's army, rushing towards Greenwood. Greenwood, whose entire body was covered with a green light, suddenly felt an incredibly sharp aura and a terrifying feeling from above him. He frowned as the green light around him became white, turning into hundreds of thick arrows of light that shot up towards the white figure that had suddenly appeared in the air. When facing Greenwood's attack, the white figure did not panic at all. He didn't seem to move, but a silver light suddenly appeared in front of his body, drawing a gigantic arc. All of the nature arrows that touched the silver light were immediately destroyed. The white figure rushed through Greenwood's attack without taking any damage at all, shooting towards Greenwood like an arrow as a cold blade stabbed towards Greenwood's chest. Cha! The ear-piercing sound of glass shattering sounded out as the ground split. Greenwood hurriedly retreated, crashing into the city wall behind him. He then straightened his body, coldly looking at the white figure. He was only wearing very simple white clothes, and he had a face that could only be described as ordinary. However, the aura he gave off caused Greenwood to feel a massive amount of danger, and the words mysterious god flashed in his mind.
I won't attack any of the weak humans or fairies. My target is you,
the white figure said, as he looked at Greenwood without a trace of emotion in his calm eyes. Greenwood coldly laughed.
A mysterious god great expert appears within the humans about once every 300 years on average, and even the most powerful humans don't live past 2,000 years. In other words, there are never more than 10 human mysterious god great experts. With your power, you can rank within the top 10 in the Forgotten Continent, so as a peak level expert, why would you give up your dignity and support the shameless robbery?
The white figure's expression did not change as he calmly replied.
Dignity cannot be thrown away, but the emperor's will must be obeyed. Don't worry, I won't attack anyone else. My duty is only to tie you down. After all, if I can tie you down, there won't be any hope in defending Ling Tian's city. However, I can't say whether that other person will be as principled as me. Just as Greenwood was about to ask who this other person was, he saw the white figure suddenly raise the long sword in his hands, instantly slashing tens of arcs towards him. Greenwood's pupils contracted as he flashed away, and with a chi, tens of 2-meter-long gashes appeared on the city walls. Every single one of them had completely passed through the city walls. The white figure continued to launch lightning-fast attacks. He pointed with his long sword as 3 silver arcs flew out, instantly traversing tens of meters, and cutting towards Greenwood from 3 different angles. Greenwood was forced to continuously defend and retreat. Not only were the white figure's attacks incredibly sharp, but once he moved they seemed to be completely flawless, like flowing water, making Greenwood fall into a passive state. He had been suppressed to the point that he couldn't even retaliate, let alone worry about the other attacking soldiers. Without Greenwood's power, the vines were quickly cut by the Forgotten City soldiers, who rushed towards the city gates with anger in their hearts.
Crap! They also had mysterious god-grade experts,
Li Xiaoxue said in a low voice as she frowned.
The fairy's power is focused on healing and protecting, and attacking definitely isn't their strength. Although they're both mysterious god-grade, Chief Greenwood's battle strength is definitely inferior,
Yun Meng Xian anxiously said, looking at Greenwood who was being fiercely suppressed. Greenwood had continuously retreated against the white figure's attacks, and he was moving further and further away. They both knew that Greenwood was intentionally leading the white figure away so that he couldn't harm Ling Tian City. Once their mysterious god-grade power was completely unleashed, it could easily destroy a large city. The city gates were right in front of the Forgotten City soldiers, and if they could destroy the gates, they would have completed the first step in taking down Ling Tian City. 100,000 soldiers rushed over like a great flood. At that moment, a shocking yellow light appeared. The powerful yellow light seemed to tear the sky, kicking up a gigantic, yellow sandstorm, and it rushed towards the Forgotten City soldiers with an air of destruction.
What is that?
Countless Forgotten City soldiers cried out with shock and fear, and they were swept into the nightmarish yellow sandstorm. Their expressions and movements instantly froze. The yellow color spread from their feet to their chests, and then to their heads, turning them into earthen yellow statues, and they were then blown into nothing by the sandstorm. When everyone on the city walls and the Forgotten City soldiers saw this terrifying scene, they all deeply breathed in a mouthful of cold air. Behind the yellow sandstorm, a 100-meter tall figure slowly appeared. The 2 eyes on its head gave off a piercing, white light, and yellow light surrounded its body. It raised its arms, and its booming voice echoed to even 100 kilometers away.
Evil intruders, become the dirt beneath my feet.
Boom! The mountain giant's arms fell and stabbed into the ground as the yellow light from its body rushed into the ground. With a boom, the ground started to violently tremble, causing the thousands of soldiers at the front to fall to the ground and roll around, unable to stand up again. At the same time, a gigantic sandstorm started to blow, causing stones and sand to smash into their bodies, decreasing their HP and making it so that they could not open their eyes.
That's the mountain giant?
The 3 heavenly kings looked up at the gigantic rock giant, their eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. They had heard Yun Meng Xian talk about how powerful the mountain giant was, but they never thought that it was to such a degree.
With such a large body and such monstrous strength, it's simply a meat grinder on the battlefield. If it were to attack players, even 10 Yanhuang alliances would be completely trampled by it,
Skyfall said with shock as he stared with wide eyes.
No wonder why they didn't allow any players to participate in this battle. With such destructive power, we wouldn't even have the right to be cannon fodder if we joined in.
As Yunfeng spoke, his teeth were chattering. The mountain giant was like an immovable mountain blocking the Forgotten City soldiers, sending them into complete chaos and inflicting serious losses.
Some of the soldiers who had rolled over to the mountain giant's foot used their weapons to fiercely attack, but their attacks only made clanging sounds and were unable to harm it at all. The mountain giant raised its foot and stomped down, sending thousands of soldiers who hadn't been killed by the sandstorm flying, killing a third of them instantly.
Beautifully done!
Yun Feng cheered. However, seeing Yun Meng Xian frowning next to him, he hurriedly asked,
Meng Xian, what's wrong? The battle's going quite well for us. Even though Chief Greenwood is tied up, the mountain giant's so powerful, and with its standing guard in front of the city, the attackers won't be able to attack at all.
Yun Meng Xian's frown became deeper and deeper as she said worriedly,
When the Forgotten Emperor came yesterday, they saw the mountain giant. Back then, the white figure tying up Chief Greenwood was also present, and with his mysterious god great power, he should be able to determine the mountain giant's strength. I'm afraid that since they've come, they have some way of dealing with the mountain giant. I just hope that I'm overthinking things.
The mountain giant's fury. The mountain giant was a high-tier Heaven's End grade boss, and although his power wasn't as strong as Greenwood's, he was able to do what Greenwood was not: completely stop the Forgotten City's army of 100,000. If it fought against Greenwood, it would definitely lose, but not even 5 Greenwoods would be able to compare to the mountain giant in large-scale battles. Its massive body combined with its massive attacks made it difficult for the army of 100,000 to take even a single step forwards. Boom! A heavy fist punched the ground, causing the earth to split and rocks to fly into the air, as countless Forgotten City soldiers were blasted 100 meters away. Boom! A massive foot descended, causing the soldiers on the ground and in the air to be assaulted by wild winds and flying sand. The soldiers pitifully screamed as they flew in various directions, and were stunned by the ferocious attack. Because its body was so big, the mountain giant could not attack very quickly. However, every move it made was a disaster for the Forgotten City's soldiers. Not only the normal soldiers, but even the Silver Corps, Gold Corps, and Celestial Grade commanders were beaten back and injured by the Earth-type attacks. They stared at the gigantic figure with despair. After personally feeling its might, they couldn't help but feel that let alone 100,000 soldiers, even 200,000 or 500,000 would not be able to break through this terrifying fortress. At the back of the Forgotten City's army, the Forgotten Emperor stared at the roaring mountain giant. No matter if it was his eyes or his expression, he was incredibly calm. His surroundings were quite clear, and only an elderly man dressed in black with a piercing gaze was with him.
It's simply a war machine. Its strength would qualify it to be even the guardian for our royal city. White Eagle was right. Although both of you can defeat it, no matter if it's large-scale battle abilities or defensive abilities, even the both of you combined will not be able to compare to it,
the Forgotten Emperor said after a while with both jealousy and envy.
Since we can't use it, then we should destroy it,
the Elder in Black said in a sinister voice.
Destroy it? It's an earth element giant, and its defense and life force are both incredibly powerful. Even though you can defeat it, it'll be impossible for you to destroy it within a short period of time. Let's do it according to the plan we discussed yesterday and seal it in the Moon God Barrier,
the Forgotten Emperor said calmly. The Elder in Black replied,
The Moon God Barrier was a life-saving barrier given by the Forgotten Continent's Moon God representative to your Majesty, and you can only use it 3 times. Using it to defeat an enemy is simply not worth it,
the Forgotten Emperor proudly replied.
With you and White Eagle, there is no one who can threaten my safety apart from the glorious Moon Goddess. Seal that rock giant and quickly finish the battle. We want them to be plunged into complete despair. We brought all of our Forgotten City's elites, so if we're not able to break through the player's city quickly, we'll become laughingstocks. Understood?
The Elder in Black slightly nodded and then raised his head. A gust of wind arose around his body,
bringing him tens of meters into the sky, and he flew towards the mountain giant. At the same time, two women were standing unnoticed in the sky elsewhere.
Aya, it's only been 2 months, and after coming here again, the situation's just like last time. That man's city has so many problems that one can't help but worry.
The woman's arms were around her chest, and her rose-like red hair was fluttering in the wind. Her red dress was tied around her snake-like waist, and it barely covered her large, round bottom, leaving her long, white legs exposed. Her entire body gave off a seductive air. As she spoke, she stretched out her 5 fingers on her right hand. There were red, yellow, and blue rings on her index, middle, and ring fingers respectively, adding another layer of beauty to her hand.
Last time the enemy was players, while this time it's NPCs. But it looks like Ling Chen City isn't in too much danger. That rock giant has made it so that the army is unable to advance at all. It should be that legendary guardian that Ling Chen City obtained from who knows where.
The young woman with golden hair next to her said as she looked on with shock.
That's not necessarily the case,
the woman in red said with her full, red lips as she moved her fingers around.
If I haven't guessed incorrectly, that giant's going to be in big trouble soon. Aya, what makes me feel even more interested is that man is never around when they need him. He's so irresponsible that I want to tie him up and savagely slap his butt.
The young woman with golden hair.
All right, let's see if that man's going to come back at the most critical moment and act like the savior again. This time, I have plenty of time to watch.
The woman in red's eyes narrowed as if she was watching an interesting play. By now, the elder in black had rushed in front of the mountain giant in a gust of berserk wind. There was a jade-green short staff in his hand, and as he waved it and chanted, the berserk wind rushed towards the mountain giant. Wherever the wind passed, it would gather up the sand and stones from the mountain giant's sandstorm, rushing towards the mountain giant. Wind was the counter to earth, and this was especially so when it was a wind attack from a mysterious god-grade mage god. The berserk wind cut off the earth element attack that the mountain giant was about to cast, causing massive damage figures to rise up from its head and all 4 limbs. The mountain giant's gigantic body leaned backwards and took 3 heavy steps back, almost falling to the ground.
Mountain giant!
Seeing that the mountain giant had nearly fallen over, those standing on the city walls cried out with worry. Not even mentioning that the city walls would have been smashed if the mountain giant fell down. If it was defeated, Ling Chen City would have lost its strongest shield, making it so that they had no chance of survival.
It's Lord Wind God Black Demon. The Sword Saint and Wind God have both acted. We won't be stopped by anything. Charge!
The mountain giant being knocked back caused the Forgotten City's soldiers to cheer with excitement. With their morale restored, they rushed towards the city gates. The powerful fairy chief was tied down by White Eagle, and they trusted that Black Demon would be able to keep the rock giant occupied. All they needed to do was attack the city, and they could do so without any worries. The mountain giant furiously shot out 2 rays of earthen yellow light from its eyes, and let out a heaven-shaking roar. Its gigantic arms smashed downwards, one towards the ground, and the other towards the elder in black, who was still gathering wind elemental essence. The elderly man in black narrowed his eyes, not making any effort to dodge. Instead, he coldly laughed as a green light exploded out from his body. A tornado that was even more berserk than the gust of wind from before rose up from beneath the mountain giant's feet, quickly spiraling upwards. It covered the mountain giant's enormous body, and brought the mountain giant into the air. That's right, the mountain giant, who was 100 meters tall and had an incredibly heavy body, had been lifted up completely by the tornado. It was brought 20 meters high in the air, and its 2 attacks were also dispelled by the tornado.
Mountain giant!
Shao Qi and Su'er simultaneously cried out. Li Xiaoshui and Yunmeng Xian also stared in shock and horror. Looking at the dot in the distance surrounded by green light, they finally felt how hopeless their situation was. Not only had the Forgotten City brought mysterious god-grade experts, but there were also two of them. Boom! The mountain giant fell from the sky like a small mountain, causing half of Ling Chen City to tremble. The Elder in Black looked down at the half-buried mountain giant and arrogantly said, "Against you, why would we need to waste the precious moon god barrier?" As the mountain giant fell, the Forgotten City's soldiers furiously charged past the mountain giant towards the city gates. Roar! A world-shaking roar came from beneath the ground, deafening everyone who heard it. As it roared, the mountain giant's body suddenly disappeared, and at the same time, a dark yellow light appeared in the 1,000 meters in front of the city gates. When the yellow light appeared, the Elder in Black floating in the sky stared before instantly realizing what the mountain giant was going to do. He desperately shouted, "Retreat! Immediately retreat!" However, it was too late. Just as the Forgotten City's soldiers heard the Elder in Black's voice, the earth had started to move, and the mountain giant once again stood up. As it stood, the land that was covered with the yellow light also rose up. The ground 1,000 meters in front of Ling Chen City was completely lifted up, and the land that was lifted was 20 meters thick. From a distance, it looked as if a 1,000-meter tall mountain was suddenly lifted up. This scene was simply too frightening, and it looked like something that only a true god could do. The mountain giant had fused with the land and furiously released all of its power. Slowly, the land was tilted by 90 degrees, and a scene that shocked the entire battlefield was revealed. The 1,000 meters of land was pushed over mercilessly towards the densely gathered Forgotten City's soldiers. The terrified scream sounded like a symphony from hell, and a countless amount of the Forgotten City's soldiers were instantly buried underneath the ground. No matter how fast they were unable to avoid being crushed by a 1,000 meters piece of land. When the land was slammed down, it became a massive tomb, under which countless bodies were buried. Less than half of the Forgotten City's soldiers were lucky enough not to be caught up within the attack, while all of the normal soldiers who had been buried instantly died. More than half of the Silver Corps had died instantly, and the Gold Corps, through their powerful life force and battle strength, did not immediately die, but by the time they could see the sun again, all they could see were corpses. More than 50,000 of the 100,000 Forgotten City's soldiers were killed by the mountain giant's furious attack, including many elite-grade soldiers. The Elder in Black was also smashed hundreds of meters away, and he cut a sorry figure as he tried to get the dirt and dust off his face. At that moment, he heard a furious roar from the Forgotten Emperor. "Black Demon! What the hell are you doing? Didn't I tell you to seal that mountain giant with the moon god barrier? Look at what you've done!" Looking down at the pitiful soldiers, Black Demon felt a chill throughout his body, and he knew that he had made a big mistake because of his arrogance. He could not allow this to go on, so took out a moon-shaped item and threw it at the mountain giant. Immediately, a silver pillar of light descended from the sky, covering the mountain giant's body and making it shine with a faint silver glow. Immediately, the mountain giant's body was fixed in place before it was completely petrified, unable to move or make any noise. The silver light continued to cover the mountain giant, and it looked like it was not going to disappear any time soon. "Oh, a barrier?" In the distance, the woman in red looked at the silver light covering the mountain giant's body and smirked. "This barrier doesn't seem to be all that much. Is Big Sis able to destroy it?" the young woman with golden hair asked. "Easily." The woman in red wagged her finger while elegantly and enchantingly smiling. Time barrier. After the mountain giant was sealed by the barrier, Ling Chen City lost its solid defensive line. The Forgotten City's soldiers, who were previously scared witless, quickly reorganized and once again furiously rushed towards the city gates. At that moment, the fairy clan's 10 elders as well as all of the celestial grade fairies descended from the city walls, forming another defensive line. However, this defensive line couldn't compare to the mountain giant. The instant they appeared, the 17 Heaven's End grade supreme commanders and 60 or so celestial grade commanders rushed out, completely suppressing the 10 elders. The fairies' power was not suited for fighting, and there were more enemies of every grade. Just as the battle in front of the city gates began, the fairy clan's experts were forced back repeatedly and were completely suppressed. They were unable to retaliate at all, let alone defend. The Forgotten City's soldiers had essentially reached the city gates without any obstruction and started to attack the city gates. Ling Chen City's gates were forged by the dwarf clan from Chilling Star Iron, and they were supported by the fairies' buffs. It would be impossible for players to destroy these city gates. Even for the Forgotten City's soldiers, destroying the city gates within a short period of time was not possible. However, as countless weapon and magic attacks bombarded the city gates, which had been in perfect condition before, cracks started to run along them. However, as the Forgotten City's soldiers attacked the city gates, they bore the dense attacks of 900 fairies, causing massive amounts of casualties every second.
What a waste of time! All of you move out of the way!
A low voice came from the sky as the Elder in Black addressed, as Wind God appeared above the city gates. As he spoke, a berserk look appeared in his eyes, as he waved his magic staff, causing a berserk gale to sweep towards the fairies on the city gates. Whoosh! The gale from the mysterious god-grade mage god was simply too monstrous, and all of the 900 fairies, who were not weak at all, were sent flying far away. The closest they fell was 300 meters away, destroying the fairies' arrow formation. The Elder in Black's gaze then turned towards where Yunming Xian and the others were standing on the city walls.
Ignorant players who dared to resist our royal city, go and die!
The Elder in Black coldly laughed as a green light flashed around his body, as a tornado swept towards the city walls. The attack from a mage god was able to instantly kill everyone gathered there. In the distance, Greenwood, who was fighting with the white figure, felt his eyes about to burst and he roared, "Hold it!" However, to avoid damaging the city, Greenwood and the white figure had moved quite far away, and he was unable to return to protect them. He could only watch as the terrifying tornado roared towards the city gates. The white figure also stopped attacking and slightly frowned. The instant the tornado was about to hit, everyone on the city walls could smell the scent of death. It was a completely overwhelming power, and although they were experts among players, they didn't have the power to resist or defend at all against a mysterious god-grade expert's attack. In the distance, the woman in red's gaze became serious as she suddenly raised her right arm. The blue ring on her ring finger flashed with a light blue light, and a strange gaze appeared in her eyes as she lightly drew back her hand. A snow-white figure of a woman appeared in front of the players with her arms outstretched, hurriedly creating a defensive barrier. The tornado smashed onto the barrier, and the jade-green barrier only lasted for 2 seconds before shattering. The tornado, which had been weakened by half, smashed into the woman's chest, causing her to cry out. Her face turned pale, but she did not retreat, and she looked like a weak willow defending the front of the city walls, coldly glaring at Black Demon.
Ingshua!
Yunming Xian and the others, who had thought that they were definitely dead, let out a breath of relief and then looked at the fairy princess in front of them worriedly. The situation was incredibly extremely dire. No one would be able to bear to attack the ice-cold fairy princess, who was as beautiful as a goddess when facing her, and Black Demon was no exception. He turned his gaze towards the fairy experts below and coldly smiled.
You think too highly of yourselves.
After muttering, he flipped his palm, causing tens of sharp wind blades that were sharper than even real knives to descend toward a fairy who was desperately fighting, slicing into his body. It was a middle-aged fairy who was at the celestial grade. He had been surrounded and attacked by 3 of the Forgotten City's celestial grade commanders, and he had long since been heavily wounded. He couldn't defend against the mysterious god-grade mage god's attacks at all, and the instant the tens of wind blades stabbed into him, his body stiffened as he silently fell.
Green Cloud! Uncle Green Cloud! Green Cloud!
Tens of sobbing voices cried out. The fairies who saw this felt as if 10,000 arrows had pierced into their hearts, causing them to scream in anguish. They rushed past the enemies in front of them, desperately rushing towards the fallen fairy, hoping that he had only fallen and had not died. The elder in black coldly laughed and raised his hands, as a gigantic vortex of wind slowly gathered above his head.
Bastard!
Greenwood's body trembled, his entire body feeling cold as flames of fury burned within his eyes. When he saw that the elder in black was about to attack again, he roared and took out the fairy clan's strongest bow. Extremely furious, he unleashed an endless jade arrow towards the elder in black. The instant the endless jade arrow was shot out, it tore through the air like it was a thin piece of paper. The sound it gave off was so powerful that even the powerful man in white's heart felt as if it had been twisted. Black Demon, who was just about to unleash his attack, suddenly felt a heart-piercing sense of danger from behind him. Without even thinking about it, he used the power of the wind to quickly move, instantly appearing 10 meters above where he had been. The jade-green light immediately pierced through where he had been an instant ago, causing ripples of shock to appear within his heart. Just as Black Demon sighed in relief, his pupils contracted, because the jade-green arrow had suddenly changed direction and was shooting towards his chest. This time, Black Demon was caught completely unprepared and was not able to dodge the arrow. When he was hit by the arrow, a ball of green light exploded as Black Demon cried out in pain. The berserk nature energy from the arrow sent his body flying backwards, and even the Forgotten City's experts below were caught within the shockwave. They were sent flying 100 meters away, and 30 or so gold core warriors were instantly killed. Greenwood tightly gripped the bow and was just about to rush towards Black Demon when the white figure blocked his path. Greenwood coldly laughed, a mocking look on his face.
In order to destroy an innocent player's city, the Forgotten City moved out 2 mysterious god-grade experts. What extravagance! I doubt that you spent that much effort 10,000 years ago in the battle with the Demon Beast clan. What I never thought was that a mysterious god-grade peak-level expert would rush into the battlefield and shamelessly kill those weaker than him.
The white figure's eyelids flickered as he calmly replied,
I already warned you that the other person would not be as principled as me. What he does has nothing to do with me. My duty is to tie you down. If you want to save them, you'll have to defeat me first.
Greenwood did not say any more, and he released all of his fairy power as he madly attacked the white figure.
Bastard!
The wind god Black Demon, who had been injured by the endless jade arrow, was completely infuriated and roared, spinning in the air as he gathered a dark green energy vortex, and after condensing it for 10 or so seconds, he narrowed his eyes as he shouted out,
All of you can go die!
The dark wind was like a demon's sickle, spiraling towards Ling Chen City's city gates. Countless tearing sounds reverberated through the air, and the heavily damaged city gates were finally destroyed, the Forgotten City's soldiers flooding into the city. The thick city walls had also been destroyed on both sides by the wind, allowing even more of the Forgotten City's soldiers to rush in. They started to destroy everything inside. The 8 celestial grade fairies, who had been caught in it, lasted only for a few seconds before their HP was cleared and fell to the ground. Greenwood's furious roars sounded out from far away, but because of the white figure, he was unable to return. The 10 elders' eyes were completely red, and tears could be seen within them as they watched the fairies fall. They almost burst into tears, The fairy clan had been hidden away for thousands of years, and they had only died from old age. None of them had died from accidents or battles before. Because the fairy clan was in decline and only had 2,000 fairies, they were incredibly familiar with each other and were like a massive family in which everyone knew each other. This was the first time seeing their family dying in battle, and they roared with fury. Tears streamed out of their eyes, and their hearts dripped with blood. With the city gates destroyed and the forgotten city's soldiers swarming into the city, even if the mountain giant could regain its freedom, there was no chance of turning the tables. Yun Meng Xian could no longer hear anything, and her vision became hazy. When she saw the sight of Ling Tian City being destroyed, her body swayed, and she fell backwards from the massive psychological impact. Big Sister Meng Xian! Shao Qi and Su'er hurriedly ran up to support Yun Meng Xian's body. When they saw that there were more and more of the Forgotten City's soldiers entering the city, tears started to fall from their faces. Far away, in the sky. Since the Savior hasn't arrived, looks like I have to act, the woman in red said as she looked towards the west, the smile gone from her face. You don't seem to look very happy, the young woman with golden hair replied. Indeed, although part of me wants to see him go crazy, it won't make me happy, the woman in red said as she raised her right hand, the ring on her middle finger starting to gather a dense yellow light. Go crazy? Why? The young woman with golden hair asked before adding. There were so many people attacking last time, and millions of defending players died, but he didn't go crazy. Ah, Yola, this time's different from the last. The woman in red shook her head as she pointed down at the chaotic scene below. It's completely different. Players can revive an infinite number of times. Even if they die 10,000 times, they won't truly die. However, many fairies died this time. After living creatures that belong to this world die, they're not as lucky as us players, and they will die permanently, never to wake up again. Knowing how fiercely protective he is, what do you think his response will be after seeing this? Yola opened her mouth and lightly trembled as she replied. I suddenly, somewhat pity the Forgotten City. However, how are you going to help them? Kill them all? The woman in red rolled her eyes. Do you think I'm a god? I'm not even able to deal with that large crowd of Heaven's End grade soldiers, let alone those two mysterious god grade ones. All I can do is stall until that man returns. As for whether he can save Ling Tian City after he returns, that's up to him. After speaking, the yellow light from the ring covered her entire right hand. She then pointed towards the Ling Tian City as she said in a low voice, Lachesis, make everything here fall silent. Time barrier. Undead Phoenix. As the woman in red spoke, a yellow light burst forth from the ring and covered the area beneath them. In an instant, the entire world suddenly fell silent. The sound of killing, screaming, and explosions all disappeared. Even the sound of the gentle breeze completely disappeared. It was as if they had suddenly been transported from an incredibly raucous world into a completely silent world. It wasn't just sound that disappeared. All of the people, fairies, pets, weapons, arrows, magic attacks, rocks, and dust froze in place as time passed. This sort of strange scene continued to last, and not a single thing moved. It was as if time had been stopped. Stopping time was something that only appeared in stories, and it was something so against nature and the natural order of things that it should have been impossible. However, this was the terrifying reality. After all, the entirety of Ling Tian City, as well as the 30 kilometers around it, had truly been frozen in time. Control over time was one of the heaven-defying abilities of the Western godly item, Lachesis, and it was the only item capable of standing on the same level as the Lunar Scourge. While most of the Lunar Scourge's abilities were focused on fighting and destruction, Lachesis' abilities were more focused on control. Control over all elemental essence, order, and fate in the world. After the world below them had fallen completely silent, the woman in red pulled her hand back as the yellow ring lost its luster and became dim. The woman's face also became incredibly pale, and her body swayed, almost falling. "Ah, big sis!" Yola cried out as she hurriedly caught the woman. "Hey, are you all right?" "I'm fine," the woman in red replied, a trace of weakness in her voice as her face remained abnormally pale. She looked below as she softly said, "I wanted to use the time barrier to give him a surprise, but it looks like this surprise will have to wait for a few months. After casting such a large time barrier, the cost was much greater than I expected. I'm fine though, and I just need to rest for a while." The woman stretched out her right hand with great difficulty and said with a soft voice to the 3 different colored rings, "Emoer, come out!" As she called out, the 3 rings simultaneously flashed with light as an orb of red, yellow, and blue light appeared. After spinning around a few times, the light dimmed and dissipated as a petite girl appeared on her hand. The girl's eyes were like stars, and she had flawless, white skin. Her hair and dress were red, yellow, and blue, and when looking closely, one would find that the girl looked about 10 years old, but was only 20 centimeters tall. She had no shoes on her pure white feet as she stood on the woman in red's hand. Looking at the woman, her dark eyes, which looked like stars twinkling, blinked before saying with a worried expression, "Master, you seem so tired. It's not good for you to cast such a large time barrier. I know, I won't do it in the future." While looking at the small girl, the woman in red did not seem as cold and proud, and her gaze and expression became warmer and gentler. "As such, I need Emoer to help me now." "Aw, got it." The pocket-sized girl referred to as Emoer nodded and floated down from the woman's hand. She then cutely shouted as her body started to spin and shot out a 3-colored light. The light gradually expanded until it became a gigantic pterosaur. It was nearly 10 meters long, and it had well-defined horns on its head. Its eyes were a deep yellow color, and they could strike terror into anyone's heart. Its 10-meter-long body was a flame-red color, while its demonic-looking wings were blue and incredibly wide. They looked similar to a bat's wings, but when they were spread, they were even larger than its body. It softly beat its gigantic wings, and it came to where the woman in red and Yola were, effortlessly remaining in the air as the woman in red and Yola stepped onto its back. Naturally, the woman wouldn't have summoned this 3-colored pterosaur before because of how big it was. Once it appeared, it would definitely give her and Yola away. However, now that those below them had been frozen in time, no one would discover the 3-colored pterosaur. Sitting on the pterosaur's back, the woman in red gradually recovered, and she looked into the distance as she said in a low voice, "If you're able to get back before the time barrier disappears, I want to see how you will deal with this impossible situation. If you can once again salvage this situation, I'll have lost my confidence in beating you." Underworld volcano. In the Underworld royal city, one could only see the fiery sky, and only after going near it would one realize how terrifying the sea of flames was. When Ling Chen was still 3 kilometers away, his entire person had been dyed with a red light. The flames from the Underworld volcano rushed to the sky, and this was no exaggeration at all. The flames were so ferocious and berserk that they extended up as far as the eye could see, and it was to the point that they really were in the sky. Was she Ling? Ling Chen was not afraid of the flames or heat at all. However, as he traveled over the incredibly red ground, he could tell that the temperature was high to an unimaginable degree. Xiao Hui and Ling Er had returned to the pet space, and Shi Ling was in her humanoid form beside Ling Chen, looking at the pillars of flames as a strange light flickered within her eye. "Shi Ling, is that voice still calling you?" Ling Chen asked. "MM," Shi Ling nodded. "And it sounds closer and closer." What sort of voice is it?
Ling Chen asked.
I'm not sure.
Ling gently shook her head.
It sounds like a soul, and I'm unable to properly describe it. It's just that, it sounds quite familiar, and it has a very, very special feeling to it.
They started to walk slower as Ling Chen and Ling came closer and closer to the Underworld volcano's boundary. In actuality, this place wasn't so much a volcano as a sea of flames. Continuing forwards, the ground became a pure crimson-red color, and it had become soft. As they walked over it, they left footprints behind. Looking ahead, Ling Chen slightly frowned. When he had first come here, the temperature had already been extremely terrifying. Even the lava purgatory that the Vermilion Bird resided in hadn't been so intense. After the Phoenix clan went extinct and the Golden Crow disappeared, the Vermilion Bird was the sovereign of flames, yet the flames here were even hotter than in the lava purgatory, and flames should not exist in the Underworld. Just what was going on? Moreover, even though Ling Chen himself didn't fear the flames or the heat, it was still possible for his equipment to slowly melt because of the high temperature.
Ah!
At that moment, Ling suddenly cried out and looked upwards. Seeing this, Ling Chen also quickly looked up. In that moment, he also nearly cried out, because within his gaze, the pillar of flame suddenly twisted and formed an incredibly large dragon-shaped flame, which rushed towards Ling Chen and Ling. Ling Chen and Ling were completely covered by the blazing, crimson fire, and the only thing they could see was fire.
Fudge!
Although he knew that he wouldn't be injured by the flames, it was still a shocking scene that was almost enough to scare his soul out of his body. Ling Chen only had time to curse, and he couldn't even evade as both he and Ling were devoured by the flames. When Ling opened her eyes, although her surroundings were blisteringly hot, she only felt a gentle warmth. Only flames existed above, below, and to her sides, and it was as if she had entered a world made purely of flames. What's more, Ling Chen was gone from her side.
Master! Where are you, Master?
Ling anxiously called out as she hurriedly ran around within the sea of flames, trying to find Ling Chen.
Don't worry, he's receiving the Phoenix God Heavenly Flame's blessings, which are incredibly beneficial to him. How could I harm the human you follow? I'm only giving him some more power to protect himself and you.
A mighty, yet gentle, ancient voice sounded out from within the sea of flames. Ling looked around her as she asked in confusion,
Who are you? Was it you who called me here? Yes. Child, I didn't wait 10,000 years for nothing. You've finally come. 10,000 years. It's been a whole 10,000 years. You've already grown up. Wonderful.
There was a mix of emotions within the ancient voice. Relief, joy, melancholy, sorrow.
You still haven't told me who you are?
After Ling calmed down, she did not try to find the origin of the voice anymore.
You mentioned the Phoenix God Heavenly Flames just then. Those are the extreme flames that only the Phoenix clan's royal clan possesses. Could you be a phoenix? But didn't the phoenixes go extinct a long time ago? Haha, that's right, I'm indeed a phoenix.
The ancient voice acknowledged this before deeply sighing.
And the Phoenix clan has indeed perished. A long, long time ago, the entire Phoenix clan perished, while I'm just an undead phoenix that has also been dead for many years. I've relied on the Underworld's deathly aura to keep the remainder of my soul and power intact. Undead. Phoenix?
Ling muttered in shock. Undead feared fire, so as an undead, the phoenix must have a darkness attribute. It wasn't that darkness and fire couldn't coexist, but that darkness sub-branch undead type was extremely weak towards fire types, so it was illogical that an undead creature could possess a fire attribute. This voice had claimed that it was an undead phoenix, and living in this sea of flames was evidence that its control over fire was extremely powerful. However,
It was an extremely unnatural existence. Fire God's Bulwark. Why are you here then? And why were you calling me? It feels like you seem to know me, Ling slowly asked. Ha ha, the ancient voice laughed. I was willing to become an undead to preserve my soul so that I could wait for you to come here. Wait for me, Ling said in shock as she pointed at herself. That's right. You possess the Phoenix Royal Clan's final bloodline and power, and you are my final concern, my child. I'm your father. Ling's mouth opened as she dumbly stared ahead. Father. The concept of a father was very faint in Ling's mind, and when she heard that the voice was actually her father, she felt shock and nothing else. This was because from when she was born, she had been by herself, without any parents or friends. There was no one who she could talk to or rely on. Just like that, she had grown up in loneliness. Afterwards, during the Demon Beast clan's catastrophe, she had used up all of her yet-to-mature flames in order to save some innocent animals, destroying a wave of demon beasts. Her flames had shocked the Demon Emperor and the 10 ancient demon beasts, and under their attacks, she had been captured and locked up by them for a whole 10,000 years. From when she had been born to until very recently, she had spent her entire life with loneliness and darkness as her companions. The first person who had ever shown her warmth and kindness was Ling Chen, which was why she had vowed to forever follow him. Within her life, she had never had the concept of a father. That's right, I'm your father. Your mother was the Golden Crow, who disappeared before your birth. My union with your mother was perhaps a mistake. At least, it caused great unrest within the entire Phoenix clan, and it was the root of the Phoenix clan's demise. However, I do not regret it at all. 10,000 years ago, in order to save the Forgotten Continent, your mother used all of her power to destroy the Demon Beast clan and in the process severely wounded the Demon Emperor, causing him to die 5 years later due to the flames of the 9 suns that she left within his body. However, your mother was also severely wounded by the Demon Emperor and other demon beasts, and she died before you were born. However, your mother did not feel sad about dying. After all, there can only ever be one Golden Crow. If she didn't die, you would never be born. As for me, I died long before your mother. It's just that the Phoenix Royal Clan has a special soul rebirth, which allowed my soul to continue to exist long after my body died. This allowed me to watch over you. 2 months after your mother passed away, I saw you being born. 3 years later, I saw you accidentally enter the Demon Beast clan's territory, and you were forced into dire straits by the Demon Beast clan. By that time, the Demon Emperor was on his dying breath, and your flames evoked the fear of the Demon Emperor as well as all of the demon beasts. They did all they could to destroy you, so I used my soul origin energy to protect you so that they couldn't harm you at that time. However, in the end, they used a special darkness power to seal you off. I tried to undo that seal for many years, and by that time, I was reaching my time limit. 10,000 years ago, that mysterious power that prevented the darkness energy from hurting me came from you. Ling asked as she stared ahead. The question that had been burning within her heart for 10,000 years had finally been answered. The undead phoenix warmly laughed as it continued to speak. At that time, I was unable to save you. However, I didn't believe that the Golden Crow and the Phoenix Royal Clan's bloodline would be extinguished like that. The Phoenix Clan has never committed any crimes, and the Golden Crow's power exists to destroy disasters in this world, so fate definitely wouldn't destroy our clans. As such, I always believed that you would one day escape or be saved by someone. In the end, I moved my soul, corpse, and origin energy to the underworld that I had discovered not too long ago. I hoped that a miracle would happen, and I was not disappointed. The dense, deathly aura turned my corpse into an undead, and also awaken the power within my body. 100 years ago, my soul and consciousness were reawakened, allowing me to remember my former memories. The reason I would rather become an undead than completely die is because our Phoenix Royal clan's power awakens after one is 3,000 years old, and the new Phoenix God is guided by the previous generation's Phoenix God. After this happens, what they will have will no longer be normal Phoenix flames, but the Phoenix God heavenly flames. As such, I continuously waited for you here, year after year. After becoming an undead, my control of fire has been continuously weakening, and the origin flames within my body are no longer controlled by me. They're leaking out more and more, creating a sea of fire that grows larger and larger, which will cause disaster for the undead. Luckily, I didn't wait for nothing, and you've finally come, my child. What Phoenix Royal clan? What memories reawakening? I don't understand what you're saying. Ling shook her head, her mind extremely chaotic. The ancient voice paused for a moment before softly replying, "You don't need to immediately understand this. Just remember, my child, that all you need to do is live well. You possess the Phoenix Royal clan's bloodline as well as the Golden Crow's bloodline, and you contain both our clan's hope. Don't think about using your power to save the world, and you should ignore those catastrophes. I just want you to be able to live well. If anything, I hope that you can remember that at least. Now, close your eyes and receive our Phoenix Royal clan's most important awakening ceremony. To be able to see this day, the 10,000 years of waiting were all worth it. I don't have any more regrets. It's just that I've caused unforgivable disasters in the Underworld, and I will not be able to make up for it." The ancient voice gradually died down, and a piercing cry sounded out from within the sea of flames. Following this, boundless raging flames descended from the sky, falling onto Ling's dazed body and completely enwrapping her. At that moment, there was also a ball of fire burning around Ling Chen's body, which had persisted for a long time. The fire's temperature went from scorching to boiling to warm and finally became incredibly comfortable. This caused Ling Chen's expression to go from being savagely twisted to peaceful, and then to the point that he could close his eyes and moan. "Ding, you have been baptized by the Phoenix God Heavenly Flames and have received the special skill, Fire God's Bulwark." A system announcement sounded out in Ling Chen's ears as the flames around him quickly disappeared. Ling Chen opened his eyes and saw that the boundless sea of flames around him was quickly extinguishing, and most of the flames around his body were gone, with only a faint layer of fiery light around his body. Fire God's Bulwark? This name, even until now, Ling Chen didn't know what had happened after he had been swept into the sea of flames, much less what the flames around him that had prevented him from moving were doing. As such, when he heard the system announcement and the mention of the Thunder God's Bulwark, his heart trembled as he quickly looked at the special skills description. Fire God's Bulwark, an ultimate blessing granted by the Phoenix Royal clan's soul's power. The power can only be given once, and it will cause one soul to take great damage. After receiving this blessing, the target will receive the Phoenix Royal clan's bloodline's protection. Effect: absorbs any type of fire element damage. Can absorb fire element damage and convert it into HP, MP, or store it within one's body to release at will, causing massive fire damage. Ling Chen's jaw dropped, and he felt flabbergasted. When he had first heard the name Fire God's Bulwark, he had a feeling that it would be something like this, but after reading the skill's description, he was given a big fright. It was almost exactly the same as the Thunder God's Bulwark given by the White Tiger, and it was just as heaven-defying. With the Fire God's Bulwark, not only would fire attacks not be able to hurt him, but it would also give positive effects. In other words, after receiving similar effects from the Aquarius Orb with respect to water, and from the White Tiger with respect to lightning, he could now do the same with fire. What's more, He could store fire attacks like with the Thunder God's Bulwark and release the stored fire attacks into more powerful fire attacks. Ling Chen stared at the quickly receding flames, and he simply couldn't understand how such a good thing had just fallen into his lap for no reason. Back then, he had received the White Tiger's Thunder God's Bulwark, which Chi Yu had called fate that even the heavens would be jealous of, because the Thunder God's Bulwark was an ultimate blessing that might not appear for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. After the White Tiger fell, it would be the final time. And now, he had received a similar blessing but with respect to fire. What's more, it had come without any reason. Back then, he had helped the White Tiger, so it was not surprising for the White Tiger to give him such a thing. Today, he had not done anything, yet he had received such a big gift. Ling Chen simply felt as if he was dreaming. Wait, no way. He couldn't actually be dreaming with H. Ling Chen pinched his face, and then looked up, as he stared in surprise. As the flames receded, a golden orb of light appeared within his vision. Ling? Ling Chen muttered as he looked at the orb of golden light, his voice filled with uncertainty. Ling was standing about 10 steps in front of him, and had her eyes tightly closed, a peaceful look on her face. However, she had become about half a head taller, and her hair had grown longer. It was so long that it was to the point that it reached her perky bottom. Her face became more beautiful and less youthful, and she gave off a more mature air. Before, Ling had looked like a 12 or 13-year-old girl, but she now looked around 16 or 17 years old. However, it was definitely still Ling, causing Ling Chen to call out her name. However, her flame-red clothes were gone, and they were replaced by a dress that was of the exact same style, but it was a dazzling golden color. What's more, the fires burning around her were brilliant and beautiful golden flames.